All right, everybody. Welcome to Electoral Daily's coverage of the runoffs in Georgia. We're going to be covering, obviously, today we're going to be focusing mostly on the two runoffs for the United States Senate that will decide control of the Senate. The first being between Kelly Loeffler, the incumbent in the Class 2 seat, who was appointed to replace Johnny Isakson, the former Republican senator who retired following complications with Parkinson's disease. And that race is between Loeffler and Raphael Warnock. And the other race, obviously, as you know, is between John Ossoff, who was formerly the Democratic nominee in 2017 for the 6th District special election against Karen Handel, which was highly watched at the time. He did not prevail there, but there's a chance he can prevail tonight here in the Senate race against David Perdue, who is temporarily out of office at the moment because his Senate seat's term expired. And we're also going to be watching tonight the runoff for the 4th seat on the Public Service Commission in Georgia. We'll have some minor updates on that going on forward in the night. But again, primarily we're going to be focusing on the Senate race. Polls have just closed, so stay tuned for more updates and analysis from Joe, Kraz, and me as well. And Eric will be joining us shortly. So Eric will be with us shortly. But for now, we're just going to wait for the first results to pour in on what we expect to be a very eventful and fascinating election night in Georgia, where all the races are going to come down to the wire just like they did in November.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a fun night. It's going to be a good night, and we're finally here, folks. The last night of 2020 is finally here. This election will finally be over. We will have our victors. We will have our losers in the end tonight. And as Harrison said, the fate of the Senate will be decided tonight. Republicans, remember, only need one. Democrats need both to get the majority.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I should note that by getting the majority, winning 2, they have a majority, not outright, but through Vice President Harris will break the tie in the Senate and give them a majority. So Democrats, there's a lot on the line for Democrats and Republicans here.
Yep. And I will mention last elections of the 2020 cycle, but the first elections of the 2021 cycle as well tonight, as we've got a special election in Virginia for the 2nd seat in the House of Delegates. Currently held by Democrats. We rate that as lean D. There's also another special election there too that we rate safety. But yeah, so turning over a new leaf tonight.
It's the end of the old and also the beginning of the new.
Indeed, yeah. Well, that's what the new year is all about. So here we are, and here we go as we are.
So let me ask you guys as we wait for results, what are you guys expecting so far, given all the Twitter speculation surrounding Election Day turnout? I guess I'll throw it to Kraz first because he was talking a bit about this before we started. So what are your thoughts so far, Kraz?
I think generally we see higher turnout today than we did on November on Election Day. So in November we saw about 900,000 to 1 million Election Day votes. I think we probably see slightly above that today. But not totally sure. Right now, we really only have anecdotes. We do know DeKalb and Fulton, 2 metro Atlanta counties, exceeded their election day turnout from November, although those are not really the counties everyone's watching. Everyone's watching the rural red counties, which where information has been a lot more mixed. So probably exceed November election day turnout. I will also note that that's a very necessary but not sufficient condition for a GOP victory here. They need election day.
Are you there, Kraz?
Looks like we're having some connectivity issues.
I think I'll just reiterate what Kraz was saying just then and in the article is that Republicans need strong election day turnout. I mean, that's the name of the game here. And the question is, where do they need it? Well, it's simple. In these rural Republican areas that have been lagging in terms of pre-election vote by mail votes and in-person early vote. If we're looking at why the Democrats have such a strong lead going into tonight, it's because of that. So for sure, the Republicans are going to be looking at rural turnout. But if you also have election day votes that are pushing some of these counties like DeKalb and Fulton over the line in terms of their turnout marks from November, that's another thing that will look good for the Democrats. And it's part of the reason why I think whichever way this election ends up going, it's going to be a nail biter. It's going to come down to the last vote, as our intro video that I put together discussed. So, I mean, I think that's big. Another thing, Joe, let me ask you, how big of a role do you think it's going to play in terms of the election day vote making up a certain percentage of the total electorate? It made about 20% of the vote. Sorry, let me rephrase that. About 20% of the votes cast in November were in-person election day. Do you think if it can get up to about 23, 24%, as Kraz has mentioned as a possibility in our article, that would throw the race into contention and in the opposite direction?
You know what? I definitely think it could, Harrison, though, although we all know about the president's, rhetoric, and especially in the aftermath of the election, about mail-in and early voting. There's been a lot of talk that what we're seeing right now is maybe just Republicans maybe who had previously, left, it had maybe voted early or or through mail for the general, have decided that they don't trust that anymore. They trust the president, the soon-to-be former president of the United States instead, and they've decided to go into person here. We really don't know what it's going to look like, whether these were votes that were maybe banked in November that are now just turning out in person, or whether these are voters that are new. Somehow the Republican Party has turned out new voters that are coming in from these northern rural counties on election day. That very well could turn this race to them.
And it's going to be fascinating as well, looking at the new voters point, because prior to Election Day, and this is largely going to be based around Democratic vote centers, there were about 145,000 new voters that had voted this time, but not in November. Obviously, that number is going to go up and could be composed of more Republicans now that we're seeing, obviously, more of these rural areas turn out stronger on Election Day, and we're still going to have to wait. But again, basically, my point stands. We do have a lot of new voters, and when you have 200,000-ish new voters that didn't vote in the last election and they voted this time, in a race that could come down to less than 1% potentially, every vote counts, and those votes really are going to matter.
And as we say this right now, Harrison, the New York Times is starting to report the first votes here. They come from Burke County. 8% of the elected vote is in the Ossoff-Purdue race. It is a 74-26 lead for Jon Ossoff. And then it is actually surprisingly slightly less, about a couple hundred votes less for Warnock here. He leads.
Yeah.
He leads just a little, about 2.2% less. He's at 73.9 to 26.1.
Thank you, Joe.
It's not a big difference, but it's a slight difference, and that's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, it's good. So just to inform the viewers of where Burke County is. So Burke County is actually one of my favorite counties in Georgia to look at, because in the 2020 presidential election, Burke County was the only it was essentially a Clinton-Trump county. It was the only Clinton-Trump county in the state of Georgia this cycle. It voted for Hillary Clinton back in 2016, but President Trump managed to flip it this time around. It's right here where my mouse is, and it's in the central Savannah River area region. So this region essentially includes the Augusta area as the main source of Democratic votes here. Oh, and just to back this up on the Georgia Regional Commission's map, this is the map we're going to be using when we're tracking by region. Again, essentially, this is when I say we're tracking by region, you're going to hear it throughout the night. There are a lot of regions of great interest to us. Obviously, the Atlanta Regional Commission Central here is the equivalent of the Atlanta Metro. So you've got suburban counties bordering Atlanta like Gwinnett County and Cobb County. You've also got urban hearts like Fulton, DeKalb, Clayton, etc. So that's one part. You also have the 14th is another big place we've been watching before the election and on Election Day. The 14th Congressional District in Northwest Georgia has been considered an example of low Republican turnout in rural areas. So we're going to be looking at how turnout booms, if it does, on Election Day in Northwest Georgia and in the Georgia mountains. And more particularly, in what is arguably a harder bag to poll is in South Georgia with rural voters, whether they'll turn out to the same degree as northern rural voters, and also the discrepancy between southern rural white voters and southern rural black voters, and whether you'll see southern rural black voters turn out to a greater degree than their white counterparts. Finally, another region I'd say we're going to be watching tonight is the coastal region, which my friend Armin Thomas mapped not long ago. Biden won the coastal region by about 2 points, so flipping it from Trump in 2016. And again, this is going to be something to watch. If the Democratic Senate candidates aren't winning the coastal area, that's probably a bad sign. If they're outrunning Biden, then that's something they can look forward to, especially if it's coupled with stronger turnout in the Atlanta Regional Commission zone, where you have counties like Fulton and DeKalb, where you ended up having stronger Democratic turnout this time than the general.
Harrison, I just want to let everyone, all of our listeners know here, the needle is on. The New York Times has started
the legendary needle. It's back.
And here's what it says right now. The expected margin in the Ossoff-Purdue race, according to the needle, with the current results right now, is Ossoff by 0.2 percentage points. But look at this.
See what I mean about every vote counts? Less than 1%.
In the Warnock-Loeffler race, it is less than a point towards Raphael Warnock right now, according to the needle with what we've got right now. Again, this is super, super limited vote, everyone. This will change as results start to come in more and more.
Here, I'll actually show what
going to
Joe's
change.
talking about to the viewers, just so we can show the people watching. This is the New York Times needle status right now, if you see it. So, Joe, if you want to keep explaining what you're talking about.
So yeah, this is the NYT needle. The New York Times uses it to kind of predict at least a range of where they think their numbers are going to be, and try and make an estimate of it. The needle is usually pretty accurate, but as you can see right now, because of how early we are in the night right now, it is very, very, very tight right now, especially in that Warnock-Loeffler race.
And here's the Ossoff race.
The Ossoff race also incredibly tight, as it's come down to time and time again. Tonight's going to be an incredibly tight race. Going to be really interesting to see where we're getting the vote, where it comes in. Nothing from North Georgia yet so far. So here we go. We've still got a long, long time to count. We know it's going to be a long time. We know it's going to be late.
It's going to be not decided tonight, I'll tell you that. I would be very surprised if it were decided tonight, given how close we expect both these races to be. Welcome back, Eric. Eric's on. And Crab, welcome back as well.
Thanks for having me back. Sorry about the connection issues. So the only votes we have in right now are from Burke County, which is south of Augusta. It's a swing county, generally pretty rural.
And the interesting thing about Burke County in Georgia is, as I said earlier, it was a narrow Trump win this time around. It was a Clinton-Trump county and the only in the state of Georgia. But if you look at Warnock did manage to win it, but again, that's because the Republican vote was split. Because if you look at the Ossoff-Perdue Senate race, Perdue actually managed to win Burke County by more than Donald Trump did. So again, if the Democrats come out on top at the end of all this with a win in Burke County, that's probably a bad sign for the Republicans.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. Again, this is going to be something that's going to keep developing. We're going to keep watching how it's going to go. If the needles with the with the needles are somehow end up being accurate at this point, it's certainly still going to take a long, long time to count.
Yeah.
As we start getting,
if you go off the bottom of the New York Times page here, they're estimating 1.2 million election day votes. This is kind of important because we mentioned in our article that we wrote about this.
That's the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's literally the sweet spot of where the race, as Nate Conan said, this race is basically kind of hinges around, right? If it's under, Democrats might be favored. If it's over, Republicans might be favored. Right now, they're projecting 1.2 million election day votes, 27% of all votes. And they're projecting they're going to go to Loeffler by 30%. So this is going to be a very close night. We're going to be in for a long hauler here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be I think it's funny as we've continued to kind of go on here, how predictable everything in what seems to have been an unpredictable cycle has been sometimes. This is going to be a close race, as we've said, for weeks on weeks now since we've gotten to the runoff. It's going to be a close race. This is not going to be something that is going to be a blowout for any singular person in these races. It's going to be really interesting to watch here. I know we're not even technically at polls closing yet. I believe polls don't technically close until 8 officially. So it's going to be a long night. We're going to be here with you the entire time. It's just as we continue to get to see these results coming in.
Yeah, but we actually, the decision desk has some of the first results in from the northern part of the state, and that's Murray County up in the northwest corner. So that's in our northwest region, obviously heavily Republican. Perdue and Loeffler are both leading by significant margins there, about the same 62% of the vote.
Mm-hmm. And this would be expected given the state is, we don't expect these margins in counties to change that much from where they were in the general election. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind.
And again, it's still fairly early going on. Murray should be hitting about 83% of the vote for Republicans, and Burke County should be, if it's really a good night for the Democrats, narrowly Democratic, or if recent trends have suggested a change, Burke County will likely end up being narrowly Republican if it's a close race. So that big margin bloated right now for Warnock and for Ossoff will go down in Burke.
Absolutely.
Kraz, what were you going to bring up earlier?
I was going to say we got some more votes in. Murray looks like they dropped their absentees. They look a little bit better for Ossoff than the November race, but the needle's still basically a toss-up. So
this is interesting, though. The needle has switched over to Perdue. It switched over to Republican for the first time tonight. It kind of just shows the switching act we're probably going to see early on here. It was Ossoff early on, but now it's shifted slightly favored to Purdue. It was slightly favored to Ossoff, and now it's slightly favored to Purdue now, while it's still slightly favored to Warnock right now on the other side. It actually says on the win probability on the Warnock-Loeffler side, it is even right now. This is the fun stuff that we see here early on. Hopefully, as we kind of get more into the night here, we're going to see stuff change from that a little bit as kind of go on.
I want to mention a county Decision Desk HQ has that says 99% of the votes in. This is Webster County in the southern portion of the state. Right now, with 99% of the vote in, they're giving them Purdue about 55.9% of the vote, to Ossoff 44.3. I'm going back right here to check to see what the results were in the non-runoff election, the standard primary or whatever you'd call it there. But this is a county Trump won with about 53% of the vote, 54% if I recall right. So this is a little bit higher than the performance for Trump. But obviously we don't know, until we kind of look at these results in the past, what the percentage of the vote was in the general here. But this is something to keep in mind, because South Georgia Republicans are going to want to boost their numbers in South Georgia. It's one of the few areas in the state that are trending Republican overall, which gives them an opportunity to increase some of their votes in this area.
I'm trying to look at how many votes are left out in Webster, because those are probably absentee ballots. But
it's a fairly small county.
The New York Times is trying to poison my mind by making it impossibly hard to find which county it is, because they have these really minute, very small dots for the small county on the southwest side.
Yeah, there's a lot of counties in Georgia.
It looks like Webster might be all in, assuming this isn't a reporting error. We've seen early in the night some reporting errors in the past. But Purdue won this county by 8. And it looks like it's giving him, I forget what Eric said, but it looks like it's giving him about an 8-point-something% win right now.
No, it's giving him around an 11 or 12%, actually.
Yeah, it's 56-44.
Yeah, sorry. 56-44.
Another county just came in, Turner County in the southern portion of the state. Right now, 76% of the...
I've looked more at Webster, and it does look like that could very well be 100% in, because only 1,372 ballots were cast in the general.
Here's another one that just came in, according to DDHQ, which is Turner County. 76% of the votes are in, and Purdue is up 60.7 to 39.4. This is another one of those counties in the southern portion, and there's a lot of counties in Georgia. There's it has the second most counties in the country. It has 159 of them. So there's a lot of these things we're going to be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and it is. We're talking about Webster County. Dave Wasserman says he expects that Webster's nearly done. Because as he said, it does match up pretty evenly with what we got in November there. He says it's not great for Dems because Republicans have only seen about a 44 vote drop off, while Democrats have seen about an 80 vote drop off from what was there in November on the Wasserman. So that would not be a great start if Webster is all in. That's not a doom result or anything. I'm not going to go out here.
No, it's not a game.
It's literally one small county. It's one small county in the state with a ton of counties in it.
Interestingly, another thing it shows you that I think we're going to see tonight, and I'd like to transpose essentially Loeffler's performance over the map of where she did better in the initial election back in November. But as you can see, Loeffler's outrunning Purdue in a county like Webster. So again, if I had to hedge my bets, I mean, we expect Purdue to outrun Loeffler in suburban Atlanta and the Atlanta metro. But in these counties in South rural Georgia and in North rural Georgia, assuming they're not majority black counties in the South that are rural, we could probably see, for sure, I would expect Loeffler to outrun Purdue if this holds. It's only about a point or so, but it's fascinating to look at.
Yeah, I mean, what's going to be, like we said, this is the type of stuff that we have to delve into tonight. Where these counties were in November, where they are right now, and whether that's going to be working out right now. And,
All right. Quick update, guys. Sorry to interrupt. But, okay, so Randolph County. Again, Randolph County does have a decent black population, and it does lean toward the Democrats. John Ossoff won the county 53-46 last time, 99% of the vote in there. Currently, 74% of the vote in. Raphael Warnock's winning the county 52.9 to 47.1 against Kelly Loeffler. And if we look at the Purdue race up here, John Ossoff's actually running ahead of Raphael Warnock right now and is winning the county 52.7 to 47.2, which is closer to his November performance, but still a little tiny bit less. So a little bit similar situation to what we saw in Webster County.
Now, I seem to recall that Democrats are really excited. They mentioned this county in particular as one of the ones with the larger numbers of African American turnout, or turnout overall, if I recall right.
Yes, South Georgia African American turnout.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Fulton County has dropped their first results, everyone. According to New York Times, 22% in the Warnock-Leffler race, it is 81-19 on the dot with 22% in. In the Ossoff-Purdue race, it is 80.2 to 19.8. So a slight overperformance there by David Perdue in Fulton County compared.
And that's what I was expecting just a couple seconds ago.
This would be no surprise. Purdue ran better than Donald Trump did in the Atlanta metro, and this wasn't just undervote. This was he actually did better among voters in the Atlanta metro area, including Fulton County. Keep in mind, Atlanta itself is a fairly small city overall, whereas the metropolitan area that's around it is enormous. Over half the state's population lives in the Atlanta metro. So when we're talking Atlanta, we're not just talking the city. We're talking northern places like Sandy Springs. We're talking the suburban counties like Cobb, like DeKalb, Gwinnett County, Henry County.
These are all crucial counties for the Democrats to put up large margins in, especially a county like DeKalb and Fulton as well, where they did exceed the total percentage of the votes cast back in 2020 in November.
Yeah, also Clayton. Keep in mind, Atlanta has around 500,000 people right now. That's good for a city, but that's not... Compare that to Charlotte or Raleigh in North Carolina, that's actually smaller.
Clayton,
a lot of the population is urban in DeKalb, it's in Clayton, and not all the population in Atlanta votes for Democrats. There is a substantial white area in the northern portion that Republicans can do better in. So we're going to keep an eye on that for sure.
Because Clayton did help break for Joe Biden and bring Biden over the line narrowly by that about 11,500 vote margin in November. So again, Democrats are going to be looking at Clayton, possibly here to bail them out again if the race is particularly close.
Yeah, Clayton, for those who aren't familiar with Clayton County, there's basically a core three of Atlanta counties. There's Fulton County, which is the largest. There's DeKalb, which is majority African American. It's right next to it. It's about the size of a congressional district. And then Clayton is right below DeKalb and below Fulton. It used to be a GOP stronghold. Now it's maybe the strongest Democratic county in the state. I think it gave Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden around 80% of the vote.
85% of the vote.
Yeah, it's bluer than blue. It is the strong point of the African American Democratic community in the Atlanta metro area.
Yep, and I should say as well, we're not just looking at the Atlanta area, because when it comes to the Democrats, in order to overcome this rural turnout, if it is strong for the Republicans, they need votes in all of their metros and all of their cities, small and large, throughout the state. So we're going to be watching tonight. I'll just go over some of them. Muskogee County here, Muskogee, that's the home of Columbus. That's when we're going to be watching. We're obviously going to be looking at Macon, Georgia, and Bibb County, Augusta in Richmond County, Athens in Clark County. And as well, when we're looking at this coastal region, which is fascinating because, again, it voted for Biden, but if the Democrats aren't winning at this time, that's not a good sign. And that's a county like Chatham County, home to Savannah. So the Democrats are really going to be trying to at least hit or exceed their numbers in a lot of these counties to make up for at least what we expected prior to this election. Strong. Oh, okay. So we've got a new update actually out of Gwinnett County. 28% of the vote reporting in Gwinnett County right now. Raphael Warnock is leading Kelly Loeffler 71-29. And in the other Senate race, John Ossoff is leading Purdue 70-29. So Purdue, again, running about a point ahead of Kelly Loeffler. So that trend from Fulton is continuing. I would assume that 28% is largely either absentee or from Southern Fulton, which is more Democratic. Sorry, not Southern, Southwestern. The western part of Fulton County, which is more Democratic along the border of DeKalb County, reporting either that or absentee. I don't really know at this point. I don't have access to the specific data. But again, Gwinnett County is a county that Biden won by 18 points, and it's been attacking leftward even faster than Cobb County. So this is another county where Democrats are definitely going to want to secure some big margins tonight.
Yeah, I will also say that if these Gwinnett numbers are mail-in ballots, which they appear to be given the partisan lean and the number of votes, this would be a substantial improvement for both Ossoff and Warnock from the jungle primary. But I'm not going to draw any conclusions, given that, one, it could be an incomplete sample, and also there could be a lot of self-selection going on with which voters stuck with mail-in ballots for the runoff and which ones switched to early in-person or election day. So best to not draw too many conclusions.
Yeah, I'm counting on you, Kraz, as a sort of our expert on the way in which the votes have been counted and what type of vote they are. But in the general election, Purdue did run slightly ahead of Trump and Gwinnett. Ossoff won Gwinnett by only about 16.3 points, whereas Trump lost it by about 18 points. So again, that margin is really going to be interesting to see. Do the Democrats manage to improve in Fulton, DeKalb, and Gwinnett, even maybe Cobb or Clayton, or at least hit their numbers, in which case that would be a good sign for them.
Yeah, I just want to give you guys an update here. Obviously, Krez mentioned earlier on there are 2 special elections happening in Virginia tonight for the House of Delegates. Projections have been made in the 90th district, which we rated safe Democratic. The Democratic candidate there, Angela Graves, has won in that Norfolk-based House of Delegates seat in Virginia, the 90th district. As expected, that seat will stay in Democratic hands. I'm kind of following along, watching all 4 of these races right now. Democrats have won that 90th district as expected in Virginia.
And while we wait on more results from these runoffs, I'm going to prepare an update on the race for the 4th District of the Public Service Commission.
This is the other race that is going on in Georgia tonight. The other runoff, I believe the candidate here only missed the runoff by literally a few thousand votes. It was very, very close. Georgia is unique in that you need to win 50% of the vote in these elections to avoid a runoff. So you can manage to get 49.999%. But if you don't have a couple extra thousand, they're going to run an entire new election after the fact to get someone over the hump.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be the type of night where we're going to see. It's going to be interesting to see if the 4th district. We're going to see interesting to see kind of how that goes, because we don't usually cover races like that. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see this race tonight. I know I'm kind of interested to see how that goes. It'll be interesting to see. Democrats are kind of hopeful in this race. They've campaigned well for this guy, but it'll be interesting to see if they can pull it off. Obviously, it's not going to have the full scale of 2 Senate races tonight, but it's interesting to see, of course, remember that there are other runoffs happening in Georgia, as there normally sometimes are.
So just for a little bit of fun to lighten the mood, Glasscock County, which, as you guys know, is pretty much the reddest county you could possibly come up with. More people, as my friend Armin brought up today, in Glasscock, more people live on one New York City block, essentially, than live in Glasscock County. Currently, though, Glasscock, before we get back to more important stuff, is 24% in the general election for Purdue. Glasscock County gave Ossoff couldn't even crack 10% here. So he got 9.7%. Purdue took 88.7%. So we're going to be watching. Right now, Warnock's at 17%, but I would say that's about it for the Democrats there, because Ossoff got about 150 raw votes. So I think that Warnock probably has about 40 raw votes left, and then that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you know what, going to be important in those counties, though, and even in those rural counties, I mean, we're going to see what the margins are. It's going to be really important.
Hey, I mean, if this Senate race comes down to Marionette Miller Meeks margins, Glasscock will save the day. Eventually, we'll have to see.
It's a weird county. It's a weird county because it's a very, very white Republican county surrounded by African American majority counties.
And that's predominantly why it's ended up that way in many ways. It started sort of become that way as a result of de facto segregation.
Yeah, but if you look at things from that perspective, it's basically there's 3 wings basically of black areas in Georgia. There's the southeastern Black Belt area, which kind of stretches up from Albany to Columbus, Albany to I'm trying to remember what the name of that city is. From Albany to Columbus. Then there's one basically it kind of goes from Macon to Augusta. It's kind of on and off, and then you have, of course, the dense urban core around Atlanta and the suburban areas and urban areas are directly surrounding it. So those are areas we're going to be paying attention to.
Ooh, quick update, guys. We have another county in from the 14th, which is that critical northwest Georgia spot we've been looking at. This is the Marjorie Taylor Greene Congressional District, and we've really been using this as a benchmark, essentially, for how rural Republican turnout in the Northwest is going to be, and we're eventually going to have to compare it to the South. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be comparing rural white Southern turnout with rural black Southern turnout. But we have Chattooga County up here, right along the border of Alabama in the Northwest. And Kelly Loeffler's winning at 74.7 to 25.2, running just a hair behind David Perdue, who's winning at 74.8 to 25.1. But for reference, Purdue won this county with 78% of the vote. And again, it could still get to that point. It'll probably exceed that point. It's only 50% reporting. And I don't know specifically the type of votes being reported by Decision Desk for New York Times. They don't really break it up. So, but it's worth noting.
Yeah,
if Republicans do underperform in North Georgia, that could be a sign of they don't want that. Essentially, you need to hit your margins or do better than them in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
What were you going to say?
I will also note we now have confirmation that the votes that came in from Gwinnett. Sorry, I was going to say we now have confirmation that the votes that came in from Gwinnett were absentee, and Ossoff and Warnock are doing better than Biden did in that group. That being said, though, there is a 30,000 vote drop off in that group from the November general election. So again, could be a ton of self-selection with Republican voters moving from absentee to early in person or election day. So just to be wary of that, but they are running ahead of them right now.
Yep. And again, when you look at that, just to add to your point, Kress, if you have the Democrats end up running ahead of their margins in county like Gwinnett, maybe Cobb, maybe Fulton and DeKalb, where you had very good turnout for a runoff election, then Republicans trimming, or I could say increasing their margins in some of these rural southern counties, even in rural counties like we mentioned earlier, like Randolph County, that does have a significant black population. That's definitely something that will add up in the long run if they can repeat those strategies all across the state, or possibly outrun their numbers in some of these rural counties in the coastal region and in the Northwest. So again, it's a balancing act. Where can the Republicans make up for votes that they're going to lose potentially in counties like Gwinnett? And again, we're just going to have to wait and see. But appreciate that update, Krez.
Yeah, look, if I'm looking at the numbers right now as a Republican, I'm not necessarily feeling super confident right now. I'm not necessarily thinking I'm looking at some of these early numbers and I'm necessarily thinking that we're hitting our numbers in certain places. I'm not saying that we're going to lose this race, but it's gonna
too early.
As we're gonna continue to say tonight, it's gonna be really tight by the end of the night. We still haven't seen a lot of the actual election day vote. That could very much change things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really know if we are in maybe the best place right now, theoretically, where we are right now. I wouldn't be super confident right now if I was in that RNC war room.
And again, adding to that, I mean, again, we're not counting either party out at this point. It's just simply too early. I mean, we barely have any votes in essentially from the Atlanta metro area and only a handful of rural counties. So again, we're just trying to extrapolate some trends from it. And Joe's point is valid, but I think I just stress again, like this race is going to be really close, both races. And all we can really do is watch, because it's not, as people say, it ain't over till it's over. It's not going to be over until every vote is essentially counted.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we have very little of election day vote in at this point. It was known that the early vote was going to skew more Democratic than expected. The question is whether or not election day vote is going to happen. If what's happened in places in mainly in that one county we're talking about, Webster County, if that is in fact the case, and Republicans are gaining 4 to 5% in those rural counties like they are in Webster from the general election, then Republicans can definitely be a little bit more confident, especially in peeling back some of those votes from those urban, suburban counties in Atlanta, as well as throughout the rest of the state.
Kraz,
I think it's still early to make a whole lot of judgments, though.
Quick question for you, Kraz. In terms of these ballots being reported, we expected on our Q&A that the absentees would be reported first, or early, but do you know the specific breakdown? Is there data for a breakdown between which votes are early in person and early absentee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the New York Times it is breaking it down by mail, early, and election day. What we're seeing right now, just from my brief overview, and I haven't really dug into the numbers too much, generally speaking, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock seem to be doing better in early votes overall than they did in November. We expected that, given what we knew about turnout and given what we knew about self-selection. There are a couple counties where it looks like GOP voters shifted from mail to in-person, and there are some counties where it looks like GOP voters just abandoned early voting altogether and went to election day. The question is, and I don't really have a clear picture right now, is exactly how Democratic is that early electorate? Because we wrote in our article if the early electorate is D plus 10 or something, or 11, it starts to get very difficult for Republicans to make up the ground. Not impossible, but much more difficult. So I'm not entirely sure right now.
Ideally, that sweet spot of 1.2 million votes that Eric talked about earlier would be perfect for a D plus 9, D plus 10 type environment going into this. Would you say, Krez?
Yeah. So, if there are about 1.2 million election day votes and they break down about the same as they did in November, or a little bit more Republican, which I think is I think what most people expect, that's about the sweet spot for between a D plus 8 and D plus 9 early electorate, which is also the sweet spot for some of the numbers that we've heard from party operatives. That's about what they expect the early electorate to be. So we've been saying it's going to be a close race. It's going to be a close race, but we're going to have to get a bigger picture, a more broad picture of the early electorate to really make any determinations.
It looks like you're starting to get some results in from DeKalb County, but they're very, very early and they're not telling much of anything at all. I wouldn't put any stock into these right here.
Just to quickly, sorry to interrupt, but just quickly to add on to that, I would say it's more interesting to look at Rockdale right now. Rockdale is a plurality African-American county, and it is one of the heavily Democratic areas in the greater Atlanta metropolitan area. John Ossoff won the county 69-28 back in November. Currently, it is only 27% in, and again, these are early votes we're seeing all across the state, whether absentee or in person, so they're going to be skewed more toward the Democrats. But Warnock, at the moment, is doing significantly better, leading Loeffler there 78-21. I would expect the margin to shrink as we get more election day votes. But if the Democrats, if Ossoff can manage to get above that 69% margin that he got last time and crack into the 70s, that's definitely a good sign for the Democrats.
Here's something. So CNN is now estimating that around 72% of the total vote has been cast either early in person or by mail. That compares to 80% for the general election.
That's a big drop. That's bigger than we expected.
So again, this is why we're really saying you can't really make a whole lot of judgments right now because we don't know what this election day vote's going to look like. We've seen similar scenarios. This is something that happens all the time in my home state, North Carolina. In North Carolina, we count the early vote first. The early absentee votes, we count those first. And mainly the early vote.
Yeah.
And so Democrats usually lead early in the night, and then Republicans overtake them later in the night. It's the exact opposite of what happens in the rest of the country because North Carolina counted their ballots correctly. Amazingly, you don't see Democrats talking about how North Carolina was rigged and flipped from Joe Biden because of the 400,000 Trump votes that appeared out of nowhere. But I'm just saying. But we can't rule that out in Georgia, especially if there's been this massive shift or even a small shift towards the early vote or the election day vote. We know this vote is going to be Republican. We know it's probably going to be a little bit more Republican at least than in the general election. The question is how much.
Ooh, quick update, guys. I think you're going to find this fascinating. Look at Washington County, Georgia, in that central region, as I was saying. It's 3 counties to the left of Burke County, where we're still waiting on updates. But 72% of the vote is in there, according to Decision Desk. And at the moment, Warnock is leading Loeffler there 56.7-43. And in the Purdue race, very, very close as well. Margin-wise, Ossoff leading Purdue 56-43. For reference, this county back in the Ossoff race in November voted for Purdue by about 1.7%. So just looking at this type of county, Washington County, it's going to be interesting to see how the remaining 30% of the votes pan out there.
Yeah, I'll also note that we have it looks like we have most of the vote in from Macon County. It looks like the New York Times is estimating that the vast majority of the vote there was cast early, and they have that in. And Ossoff is running ahead of his November margin by about 3 or 4 points there. I expect that to come back down to earth a little bit when the election day votes are counted. But the New York Times estimates that votes there are in. And you mentioned Washington as well, Ossoff and Warnock running a little bit ahead there. So interesting results so far.
Another county similar to Washington, and this is right next to Macon, which I thought it was interesting that you brought up, is Dooley County. Again, 30% of the votes still out, but with 70% in, Warnock is currently winning Dooley County, and Ossoff also currently winning it. For reference, it voted for Purdue by about, looks like, 9 points or so, maybe 8 points back in November. Again, small counties, not many votes, but it's going to be interesting to see.
Those swings are important. If these swings are legitimate, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are going to win these elections. That's just kind of the fact.
Well, I was going to add that we have to wait for election day votes to come in.
But if those swings are consistent, if those are consistent swings, that is going to be incredibly hard for the Republicans to come back in this race. That's why. It's just starting to become, I would say, if I'm looking at this again, if I'm in RNC headquarters, I'm looking at this, I'm starting to feel a little bit concerned, quite honestly.
Again, though, I would take heed, essentially, of making calls this early at the end of the day. I'm still pretty confident that Republicans could come out on top in this race at the end of the day. I would wait just for the remainder of the election day votes to come in, because a lot of these swings could be nullified or made fairly minute or unimportant once the remaining votes are counted that will probably favor Republicans.
Yeah, we don't have much of a picture in of the election day vote, so we really need to wait for a lot of the stuff to show up before we do make any judgments here.
And the fact that potentially 30% of the total votes cast could be made up of election day votes, meaning that that's literally 10% more than back in November, that literally throws it into limbo. I mean, that's fascinating. We really don't know what that brings or what it entails and how it helps the Republicans or hurts them from attaining that 1.2 million vote sweet spot needed to overcome, a D+10 pre-advantage in the ballots.
Yeah, I mean,
I was going to say 28%.
Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say 28% of the ballots being cast on Election Day and 72% early lines up almost exactly with 1.2 million Election Day votes. And again, we've said repeatedly, that's kind of the sweet spot that really then all you got to know is you got to know the Election Day margin, which the New York Times is estimating R plus 30. We thought it'd be less. So they're saying R plus 30. We thought, based on our conversations and our own estimates, it'd be less. But they think R plus 30. But they're also more aggressive on what they think the early vote margin for Democrats is. So it probably cancels out to a certain extent. But, all you got to know is those two variables. And we're going to start to get a picture as the results roll in.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that, the things canceling each other out, even if we start seeing it by a regional basis in Georgia, what you're left with is just a really close horse race between both sides, which is always the best kind of election, the most interesting, even if it can turn into the most painstaking. I mean, I guess the only way this could get more chaotic is if we do have like Marionette Miller Meeks margins and someone wins by 6 votes, in which case it's not getting certified for like the rest of this year.
They'd probably, if we're being honest, they'd probably just rerun the election at that point. I know that's ridiculous, but the last time we had a Senate race that close, that close was in New Hampshire, I believe in the 1960s. It was within 2 votes.
Oh, the 74 one. That was
rather than certifying it, Congress just said, run another election. We're not going to do this. And I believe it was the Republican had won the general by 2 votes, if you assume that's accurate. And then the Democrat won the ensuing election by a large margin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully, I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, because Lord knows we don't need more of it. We don't need more of it.
Yeah, no,
I would like to be done. Please.
I agree with Joe 100%. I do not ever want to hear about the words Georgia and runoff in a sentence again for at least until January 2023.
I think I would agree with that personally.
All right, we got another interesting result. Sorry. I was going to say we have another interesting result. If Decision Desk, our friends at Decision Desk, if they are accurate, they say that currently Crisp County, rural county. Oh wait, not bad. I was looking at the wrong county. Carry on.
Yeah, no problem. We all make those mistakes.
Yeah, it happens.
So I guess we just need to keep the viewers entertained while we wait for the elephant in the room, that is the dropping of the election day votes. So really, I think we should just do like a little roundtable discussion here. At this point of the night, who would you rather be, honestly, at this point?
Democrats.
I was going to say, yeah, Ossoff and Warnock. Just to quickly correct myself, because it is still interesting and I just realized it. Turner County is 100% in. They have Purdue up 60-40 there. And in November, the total vote in Turner County, according to my numbers, was 62-36 Purdue. So if that's accurate, that's a full 6% shift to Ossoff. But again, we have seen reporting numbers kind of be off in the past. So I don't want to mislead anyone, but I would probably rather be Democrats right now by a slim margin.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I would still rather be Republicans because I think the election day vote is going to overrun everything we've seen so far at the end of the day. If there really is 30% of the total electorate devoted solely to election day votes, and it really is going to be Republican plus 30, that is definitely still, in my opinion, enough for them to get 1.2 million votes needed to overcome what we consider the threshold, which is essentially the votes needed to overcome a D plus 11 ballot lead.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, what about you? I mean, that's just my bald take.
I really don't know who I'd rather be at this point because the vast chunk of the votes are not in yet. And so I simply can't say that from any real perspective what they would be. I mean, the estimates of the early vote from New York Times, or New York Times estimating 26%, which is still an increase. And they're estimating it would be Loeffler plus 32 and Purdue plus 32 as well. So I want to see what those votes look like, and I want to see what the margins shift. When I start seeing things out of those big counties and also some of the larger counties in the Northeast, that's when we can really start to talk about what things look like. Right now, there's just not a whole lot in to make a judgment off of, I don't think. Mm-hmm. I would definitely rather be Warnock than Loeffler right now. I don't know if I'd rather be Ossoff over Purdue at this point.
Are we going to have the shock? Are we going to have the split result? That might be starting to turn out to be the question here. If maybe we could have the split result in which, a couple of thousand people, just enough, split their ballots for Warnock and then Purdue, what a night that would be, right?
Yeah, and it would call into question, really, I don't like to take partisan sides on our election coverage, and I'm not, but a lot of people have criticized Loeffler a bit for trying to appeal more to the rule block to boost turnout and how that may have ended up hurting her with some of these traditional Republican Biden voters in the metro area, which is obviously part of the reason why Purdue's outrunning Loeffler in the metro area, even though we're still waiting on some of the suburban counties. But if there ends up being a split, looking at it, it would make some sense if you look at how the campaigns were run.
Yeah, it would absolutely make sense. And also, to be fair to Raphael Warnock, he went down to southwestern Georgia quite a good bit. But maybe that could be the difference maker in all this. If that pays off, if this comes close and it does become a split result, it could be him going down to southwest Georgia and campaigning there could become the main difference here in him winning and maybe Jon Ossoff not pulling this out.
Yeah, it's a good point, Joe. Just look at some of these counties already coming in South Georgia. We've talked about Randolph too much at this point, but it's a really good example because it does have a significant black population. And it's worth looking at some of the potential ticket splitting there, even though we don't have a racial breakdown yet. But Raphael Warnock is winning Randolph County 54-46, whereas Jon Ossoff is only winning the county 53.8 to 46.2. So again, that's only a 0.4% difference. But 0.4%, that's still a small difference. So that's still a set of voters in that county, potentially applicable to a region, that are splitting their tickets. And it could make the difference statewide when you accumulate the votes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's all going to come down to the most minute differences on a night like tonight. That's what it's going to come down to, just minute differences. Just because of how close these races have been and how much money's been spent, how much people have campaigned down there, how tight it's been, how tight Georgia is currently as a state. That's just kind of how it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, interestingly enough, we just got some more ballot drops you guys are going to be interested in. So in Clayton County, 27% of the votes in, according to Decision Desk. Jon Ossoff's currently leading 88.8 to 11%, with Raphael Warnock doing even better at 89% to 10.9%. Mm-hmm. Again, like most of these counties, as the election day vote comes in, I would expect it to go down slightly because that's greater than Joe Biden's margin by like 4 points. Maybe they improve slightly off of that margin in Clayton, and if so, that would be good for them. We're going to have to see. Another county is Douglas County. More of the vote in, 83% of the vote in Douglas County right now. Strong margin for both Warnock and Ossoff. About 5 to 6 points better than their performance in the previous election. But again, these performances are roughly 4 or 5 points better than what they did last time. Even if they end up overperforming, or at least Ossoff ends up overperforming his margin from last time by maybe a point or two, it still would be a slight decrease of about 1 to 2%.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see here how that goes in itself too.
And Cobb is also going to be counting and coming in more as we wait. So that pretty much means we're getting at least some votes from all the counties in the metro area at this point. And the northern counties where you have some suburban and then toward the northern parts of those counties, more exurban areas like Forsyth, for example, where Democrats have seen pretty positive trends over the last few cycles in a county that is traditionally one that Democrats can not even crack 15% in coming in.
I have to say, Harrison, before I don't know if I'm interrupting you here, but I do have a prediction. Elections Daily is now projecting that in the 2nd district in Virginia and the 2nd House of Delegates district, Candy King has barely held on to that seat for Democrats. It is a huge underperformance from Jennifer Carroll Foy, 23-point win in November of 2019. We expect King to win by about 2 or 3 points. Super low turnout, but still a major underperformance there by King, but she will hold on. The House of Delegates in Virginia will stay at 55-45. Important in some of those more controversial legislation pieces that they might be pushing in the upcoming winter section. Democrats will hold on to the 2nd district. Certainly, though, not necessarily the type of victory that they're looking for in a seat that is very heavily blue, and for Joe Biden by about 30 points in the November election in Virginia.
Do you think it's at all indicative of anything we could see later this year in Virginia, or is it not worth looking at because of the low turnout?
It's a little bit of both. Low turnout here quite clearly is going to make a big part here. Heather Mitchell, who is the Republican candidate in this race, heavily outperformed Joe Biden in the Stafford County portion of this district. She won it by about 25 points. That is a huge overperformance of any Republican recently in this district, at least since Jennifer Carroll Foy has been the delegate here. Prince William County numbers were about hit, just maybe a little bit under by Candy King, but the Stafford County numbers here are a real problem. But like I said, very low turnout election. Only about 10,000, probably only meets the somewhere about 9 to 10,000 people voting in this special election. Considering how heavily populous these seats are, that's not a whole lot. Not much to extrapolate from. Republicans, might give them some smattering of hope. My person from Prince William County said if Republicans are able to get over 40% of the vote in this race, that he said that would make him feel good going into 2021. But there's obviously still a long time to go. Lots and lots of things can still happen. I wouldn't personally extrapolate from this too much.
We're getting a little bit in from Forsyth County now in Georgia. I don't know if it's just a DDHQ, but what they have right now is they have Kelly Loeffler with 2% of the vote and up 82 to 18 in that race, and then in the Purdue race they have Purdue up 82.5 to 11.5. So they have obviously that's only 2% of the vote. That is substantially higher than what you got in the general from Forsyth County. But again, this is part of the reason why we're keeping an eye on this the whole night, is we don't know how the votes are going to go. I'll be very surprised if Republicans pull 80% of the vote in this county. This is a county that Democrats won 33% of the vote in November, specifically in the presidential race. Republicans haven't gotten 80% here since 2012, but it is something you want to keep an eye on. And they have very big turnout. Forsyth County had bigger turnout. Forsyth and DeKalb, I know for sure, had higher turnout on election day today than they did in November. At least that's what I had read.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and even if they can just slightly decrease the Democratic performance in a county like Forsyth from November, again, obviously still a heavily Republican county, but a swing from 2012, or I guess I should say a trend from 2012 to 2020, when you have essentially the Democrats going from 15% of the vote to 33% of the vote in 3 election cycles. Long term, that's not a good sign. But the Republicans are going to be. If I were the Republicans in Georgia right now, I'd be saying we need to milk as many votes as possible out of this beltway of these more exurban counties north of Atlanta. So you're looking at
Forsyth, Hall, Cherokee,
Hall,
Bartow.
Forsyth, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I know
predominantly
Cherokee, I heard that Cherokee had a substantial turnout in early voting, in election day voting today, which would be good news for Republicans because Cherokee is an absurdly Republican county. Most of these exurban border
It's actually
counties,
redder than Forsyth now.
Yeah, it's a very large county in terms of population, and it's a very red county. This is a county that went to Donald Trump, gave him 69% of the vote, and it's got over 250,000 people living in it. So lots of votes still out here. New York Times, I think they just posted this, which it makes a good point, which is they have the Needle has them about 1 point for Warnock and about 0.8 for Ossoff, but the way they word it under the basically the confidence interval stuff, they word it below is more interesting. They think there are about 3.6 million votes remaining, and if that's right, Perdue would need to win about 51% of the votes right now. They think he's on track to win between 47 and 55% of the votes, and their best guess right now is 51%. So, they're leaning it a little bit. They're leaning it a little bit towards Ossoff, but there's a lot of margin there. It could be lower, it could be higher, and we really don't know what this election day voting is going to look like. Because 1.1 million is, again, that's squarely that area where the race is a toss-up, or the races were very competitive. 1.1 million, 1.2 million, not the lower estimate that some had projected, or the higher estimate, the estimate of around 1.5 million that we had heard from Republicans and Democrats. That hasn't materialized either, but neither has the 850, 650, 750,000 that others were thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say it's something we're definitely going to watch as we go on tonight. But another thing that I think is really good news is we should have a pretty good idea about the state of both races, even if we're not able to make a call due to the closeness of both races. But again, at the rate at which these early votes are coming in, essentially, whether by absentee or in person, it's good news, honestly, that we're going to have nearly 1 million of these votes already counted, in addition to that 30% of the electorate that is in-person election day. So I think we're going to have quite a significant amount of ballots to see through tonight, search through, and make a conclusion, potentially.
Absolutely, for sure. We'll see. We will see if we're able to make a conclusion tonight. It's really all going to come down to this election day vote. That's really all it's going to come down to. Once we start seeing this election vote come in, who's voted and who's turned out.
Mm-hmm. I'll also note again, we have virtually a fully complete county in North Georgia, Franklin County. I don't think you guys brought it up, but Perdue and Loeffler are basically running even with their respective November margins and actually slightly ahead of Trump there, which is good news for them. Bad news for Republicans. There's a 14% drop off in turnout from November overall, and we do not believe that would. That might not be enough. In a really, really red county, they probably need more than that, but obviously it's not enough to extrapolate from. But another data point nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. And this is in the Collins portion of the northern portion of the state for those interested. It's in the 9th district.
Yep. We're getting closer and closer to a complete Glasscock County result, but if you guys want to look at it again, at the moment, Ossoff's doing about a point better than he did last time, same with Warnock, so able to get out of the single-digit range of 9.7% to like 10.5% or so. And again, they've gone down, so they could go down into the single digits, but we're going to have to see. Not that significant, obviously, but still interesting to see how the different trends are moving throughout the state in terms of swings from November to now.
Yeah.
Big update. So Burke County is now leaning Republican. Sorry for that enthusiasm It's just basically we're seeing a more accurate picture of what Burke County will probably be.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Trump won this county by about 2 points. It was a Clinton-Trump county. It's the first one to report. And Ossoff actually lost the county by about 3.5 points to David Perdue. So again, right now it's up 51.5, 51.35 to 48.65, and Perdue doing slightly worse, 51.1 to 48.9 over Ossoff.
Mm-hmm. And that alone has shifted the needle a whole 0.1% in both of the races here. So again, this is the sort of margin shifts we're talking about here. That you can see one county go from blue to red with not a whole lot of votes in, and that's going to shift the needle just a tad bit. That's why I continue to stress caution in examining these early results, because they're useful in looking at where things are. But we're not even out of the first inning yet. I mean, we're very, very early into this game. And until we start seeing some of these results coming in, some of these other counties, I think we've got over half the counties in the state still haven't reported any votes yet. And specifically the main ones, Cherokee, Bartow, Forsyth, other counties around Georgia. I think there's one, Fayette County, that's going to be one to pay attention to. That's one of the last of the Fulton-adjacent counties that is Republican at this point. And it's barely so. It's right sandwiched between, or right next to, Fulton and Clayton counties. And it started to get a little bit bluer and bluer and bluer as more votes have come in from those counties. So that's going to be one to keep an eye on when it comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we got some in from Hall County. Here we go. Hall County is really important for both parties here. Hall is right past Gwinnett County. It's past the portion of Gwinnett that is still red to a degree. And it's a very, very red county. It's also a fairly diverse county, oddly enough. It's got a substantial portion of Hispanic voters. There's a large meat packing facility around here, around Hall County. And so a large portion of the population is Hispanic, about 20%. There's even a district in the state house that's fairly Hispanic overall. But it continually elects Republicans, and it stayed Republican, even as other shifts have gone on. It only went from a Trump plus 73% to a Trump 71% county. Democrats gained here, but that's not quite as big as a swing we saw in some of these other places. Right now, with 47% of the vote in, David Perdue is ahead in Hall County, 76.9% of the vote. Loeffler is also ahead in this county, 76.5% of the vote. If I recall right, that's a little bit larger than the number was in November.
71 in November percentage win.
And this is a large county. It's got over 100, almost 150,000 people. These are the counties that are going to make a difference for Republicans here.
It'll be interesting.
They want to get back into this thing.
It'll be interesting to see if Loeffler's margins of underperformance in some of these counties in the Collins district, his old House district, now it's represented by Andrew Clyde. But it's going to be interesting if the deviation between Perdue's margin and her margin grows further in any of these counties, because that'll show you whether or not maybe voters who voted for Collins may have decided. There are going to be some, oddly enough, Collins-Warnock voters, although it's hard to think of, but potentially.
I am not. If I'm Kelly Loeffler,
and again, we have another complete county in South Georgia. It's Wayne County.
Oops.
Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say in Wayne County. According to Decision Desk, almost all the votes are in, like 99%, and we've got Perdue and Loeffler basically plus 56. This would almost exactly match Perdue's November margin. So good news for ours there. Similar to Franklin County. Other piece of kind of bad news, though, same with Franklin County. I'm looking at close to a 20% decrease in votes cast in Wayne County from the November general election. That makes a little bit of sense. Rural South Georgia did lag behind some more urban areas in terms of turnout. And of course, Trump did his rally in North Georgia, not South Georgia. So that kind of to be expected that maybe there's a little bit more of a lag there. But so there's good and bad news there for both parties.
I'm just going to say this right now. If I'm in Kelly Loeffler's war room right now, I don't know if I'm feeling too good right now. We're seeing continued underperformances here in counties all across the state compared to David Perdue. Considering what we're looking at right now, I wouldn't feel too good right now if I was in Kelly Loeffler's war room. In my opinion, the chances of a split decision has gone up, in my opinion, ever so slightly. But if I'm Kelly Loeffler right now, I'm not feeling too good personally. I don't think she's feeling too good. I'm not feeling too good if I'm part of her team. Looking at the numbers of what we got right now, I don't know if I think we're looking too good.
Well, she's only running.
It's still
She's
too
basically
early.
running
She's
about
running
half
like
a percent.
0.1% behind Purdue.
No, not one. That's if you go by the
0.1%.
needle. If you go by the raw vote so far, Warnock is running about half a point, a little bit over half a point ahead of her overall. Ossoff is 53.36. Warnock is 53.72. So that's a little bit of an increase for sure, but it's not necessarily a killer. But I definitely would rather be right now Purdue than I would be I would be Loeffler for
Still, I
sure.
still hold it's too early to make any decisions in these races. I'm not going to automatically write off Loeffler at this moment, but I will agree with you guys. I would rather be Purdue. And I would say at this point that the likelihood of a split decision is arguably, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting. It could potentially get to the point where a split decision may be more likely than both races going to the Democrats or the Republicans. But still, Loeffler could still win. So we just have to wait. Wait is the name of the game because Purdue's only up, as I was saying. I meant to say 0.3%. It sounded like I said like 1% or 3%, but I was saying 0.3.
Yeah, I'm just looking at these numbers though right now, Harrison. I just don't know if I can really see where the numbers are going to be where the Republicans can overtake it here. I really do think that we are right now, at the very least, looking at these numbers headed towards a tied 50-50 Senate, which would give Democrats the majority thanks to the vote of Vice President Kamala Harris. I really do think we are. I really do think we could be heading to that.
They would need both seats. And we do have Cobb results. 30% of the votes in. Again, early votes skewed heavily toward the Democrats. So it makes sense that Warnock has 67% of the votes there. I do not expect that to last. Ossoff only won it by 10 points. Biden won it by slightly more. So, again, there is no way that Cobb County is going to end up being Warnock plus 35. So that's part of the reason why I'm saying hold your horses on automatically writing off the Republicans at this point, because there's literally no way, even in these counties that have basically trended away from the Republicans to the point where many Republicans have become toxic there. Kelly Loeffler's not going to drop 10%. Purdue's not going to drop 10% from his margin in November in these counties. Yeah, I just wanted. That's just my opinion. I know we're going to disagree, but I personally still hold that I think the Republicans can still win both these races, and I would never, want to call it.
It's way too early to judge on this overall. I definitely would like, if you're a Democrat, you're probably happier than expected from these, but these races certainly aren't in the bag, especially when that massive chunk of election day votes are in.
Sorry
we
to
don't know
interrupt.
how Republican those are going to be.
We have something big. I hate to interrupt, but Fayette County, 57% of the vote is in right now. Kelly Loeffler currently leading Warnock and Fayette County 54-46. And David Perdue doing slightly better, 54.7 to 45.3. Both those margins are slightly better for the Democrats by the tune of about 1.2% from last time. But again, once we get those election day votes in Fayette, I think we'll see either it going back down to where it was in November or possibly less of a Democratic performance than it was in November. But again,
and for comparison, in the presidential race, this is a 52.7 to 45.9 county. So this is only a 7-point, around a 7-point win for Republicans, whereas right now, with 57% of the vote in, or whatever, the vote's around 9%. Or 8% overall, I guess. It's a little bit closer to that at the moment.
Yeah, another one we're waiting on is Henry County, similar to Rockdale County. Henry County, Warnock has about 66% of the vote right now. Ossoff ended up winning that by about 19 points back in November. So again, that'll be just looking. The Republicans, the name of the game right here is, can we hold the Democrats to their margins in November in a lot of these counties, and can we make up for it in our rural counties?
I think this is something that we've got to have to start to talk about. Really, is did Donald Trump's refusal to concede potentially hurt Republicans here? There's going to be, I think, talk about that. There's going to be talk about the president's effect on this race. No matter what we see right now, I think it's something we have to talk about, whether or not the presidents continued to concede. Maybe not say that the votes have been rigged or anything. I don't think that's affected turnout in any way. But, in these suburban counties, has the president kind of just refusal to accept the results of this election, maybe hurt Republicans here enough, mainly David Perdue, that it's kind of hit them in the end here polling-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Still, almost 80% of Georgia Republicans, according to new polling, do believe the election was rigged in Georgia. So I honestly don't think it's going to dampen Republican turnout that much. And still, Purdue is running ahead of where Trump ran in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not 2016, sorry, in 2020, even now, and ahead of Loeffler, even if it's by minute margins. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good point, Joe. We're going to have to see how it plays out. But at the moment, I honestly don't know. If Georgia were more Democratic, and we could accurately represent their voters by party registration if they registered them that way, then I think it'd be better to see how it plays out. But if we look at some of those more moderate Republicans that make up that 20% that don't believe it was rigged, and then near, I think, 93% of Democrats and potential independents who don't think it was rigged, then maybe. But we're going to have to see.
Right now you've got David Perdue, according to the New York Times, running about 4,000 votes ahead of Kelly Loeffler right now. It would be certainly very, very interesting if that margin came down to the really importance, how important that margin could be if we really, really get tight here. That margin could be really, really important.
So, quick update. We're starting to get in some results from Bibb County right now and Muskogee County, and those are the homes to Macon and Columbus, respectively, in terms of those being strong Democratic cities, predominantly African American in the southwestern part. And again, very strong margins for Democrats, about half the vote in, in the case of Bibb County, 61% of the vote in. So it's a good start for them. But again, I would wait because they're about 5-6 points ahead of where they were if you look at John Ossoff's performance or the combined Warnock performance back in November.
Yeah, it's like you know what we still you're right though. We still do have a lot of E-Day vote to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Still got a lot to wait for it to come in. Polls probably just officially fully closed across the state, so we still got a lot to wait for here, especially in the northeastern part of the state and just the northern part of the state in the general. There's still quite a lot of these counties still clearly have quite a lot of their vote left to count.
Yeah, we're into the second inning of the game at this point.
Yeah,
or I would rather use a football layout and just say we're in the second quarter right now. Because we have about 30% of the vote in, which is a third of the total electorate, roughly. So we're kind of just in the second quarter. So I guess halftime will be us being able to analyze and see how that first bunch of those election day votes influenced our perception of the turnout, specifically for Republicans in these rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in that in Bibb at least, it looks to me like Democrats are continuing to run ahead of their mail-in ballot total. So, in November in Bibb, it was, and right now it's looking at Ossoff plus 52. So obviously that's a big improvement. And he is also running ahead of his own early vote there. The early vote right now is Ossoff plus 31. And according to my spreadsheet, back in November, the in-person early vote was Ossoff plus 19. So a big shift, but election day has gotten substantially redder in some of the counties that have been full reporting. So
just wanted to let Joe know he got a nice compliment.
That's my RA, Sean. Appreciate you watching tonight, buddy. No, but you know what? We're gonna be watching here. We've got about 30% of the vote in right now. It's gonna be really interesting. We appreciate that we've averaged also. I want to say to our viewers tonight, I really appreciate we've averaged around 35 to 40 viewers tonight, right now, live right now. I see I hope everyone knows who's watching that. We really appreciate that right now. As we really start to get to the bones bare right now of these results. As we've crossed that 8 o'clock margin.
Yep, so we'll stay with us. Do not leave. This is where it gets interesting because this is where we're going to see the races tighten up as the predominantly Republican election day vote begins to come in. So there is going to be no dooming here for anyone because it's bad to be – do not be a doomer when you only have 29% of the vote in.
Yeah.
You know, I really looking at it here. Fulton just had a huge drop. New York Times now reporting that 80 with 82% of the estimated votes in. John Ossoff currently leads David Perdue about 74 to 26 there over incumbent Senator David Perdue. Raphael Warnock leads there 75 to 25. So again, we're starting to see, 1 point in Fulton, these suburban counties that continued 1 point overperformance by Warnock compared to Ossoff in these suburban, in these Atlanta area metro counties. So that's going to be something interesting to see if that continues going on this tonight here, what we're looking at here. That's going to be something to pay attention to, I think, as we kind of get this E-Day vote in. That trend kind of continues across the Atlanta metro.
And it's interesting because Fulton and DeKalb County, as Kraz mentioned at the beginning, actually outvoted their totals in November. So that's interesting as too. Maybe that plays a role. So in terms of the other Democratic cities in the state, we're still waiting on Clark County, which is home to Athens, the University of Georgia. We're waiting on Richmond County, home to Augusta. And in the coastal region in Chatham, we're waiting on Savannah.
Apparently, since we're waiting on some more results to come in, apparently in non-political news, apparently Dr. Dre is in ICU, suffered a brain aneurysm, for anyone who's interested in rap music. We're really waiting for a lot of these results to come in because it is very early right now. So we got to fill the space with whatever there is.
That was random, but I wish him the best. That's very unfortunate to hear. And yeah, I'm trying to keep things going, but oftentimes, with elections, it just pertains to waiting. And when we only have 2 races, it sometimes gets a bit dicey. And I'm going to try and find some interesting non-election news for you guys in the meantime. So I'll be right back.
Mm-hmm. And trying to go through something here.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Chris.
If I could chime in while you look, I was just going to say, so right now, the pattern I'm seeing emerging from counties that are fully reporting, so election day, mail, etc., is that Republicans are holding their November margins in very rural, very white, southeast, northeast, northwest Georgia. But for one reason or another, in southwest Georgia, we're seeing some pretty substantial blue shifts. Dooley County has shifted 6.5% or 6% towards Democrats. We talked about Jur and Crisp have both shifted pretty significantly. So right now, we're seeing kind of what we saw on election night for the presidential race, which is almost a kind of weird regionalization of the results that we didn't expect. So Republicans holding serve in very white rural areas, but it seems to be Democrats are doing better in diverse rural areas. Maybe that has to do with Black turnout, which was obviously a storyline throughout the year and up to election.
Yeah. It's going to be really all come down to what it is right now. If we look at the needles right now, on the needle point right now, NYT is projecting a 0.8 point victory for John Ossoff, while in the Left-Foot Purdue race, they're projecting a 1.1 percentage point victory for Raphael Warnock, according to the NYT needle, the all famous needle. That's what it's saying right now. Really, again, it's just it's still a lot in the Atlanta area. Again, not a whole lot really yet from northern Georgia. There's still many counties in that part of the state that have yet to report any results, according to the New York Times. So there's still a lot there that it maybe could change things. Whether it'll be enough, I don't think we're ever going to know.
Also, just note how fast Georgia's counting at this point. They're reporting, I would say. I mean, we're already at 40% of the vote, and polls have only been closed statewide technically for 20 minutes. So this whole election, we could potentially have a good idea about the winner at least, or who's likely to win by maybe 11 o'clock tonight. Definitely before midnight. At this rate, if ballots are continued to be tabulated and reported at this rate, I would estimate we have 75% of the vote within the next hour or 2 hours, probably 2.5.
Yeah, here's something. Here's from the user Candy L on Twitter. mention something in here real quick. Pulaski County, kind of the shift that we're talking about here. That's that pay attention to. In November, Biden won 51% of mail votes, 25% of early, and 32% of election day. Now, Ossoff is winning 55% of mail, 26% of early, but only 26% of the election day vote. So that's why we got to be really careful. We have basically no election day in and around Atlanta. That's not actually great news for Democrats because
I know we have to stop dooming.
Yeah,
it's too early.
Yeah. Again, Atlanta election day, there's not a whole lot of it, which you could take for a couple things, but part of that could mean that it's more Republicans. It will be almost exclusively Republican. That's definitely one possibility here.
And when you break this down by party, it makes a lot of sense that most Republicans in Georgia have come to just simply not trust in our early mail-in voting, BBM absentee, whatever you want to call it, or early voting in general. I mean, and it lines up with that poll. If you think about it, where near 80% of the Georgia Republicans who responded in the poll said they did think that the election in Georgia was at least somewhat rigged. So it honestly makes more sense between the general election in November and now that we've seen this increase in the Republican margin of the election day vote, like Kraz mentioned, in excess potentially of Republican plus 30, and an increase in the total number of the electorate being composed of in-person election day votes, probably because we've seen some Republicans who prior to the result in Georgia in November, maybe voted by mail, but ultimately decided to vote in person this time around. They become skeptical.
Well, that skepticism, we're going to see if that skepticism is replicated in the election day vote as we hopefully start to get more and more of that coming in here. A lot of the, again, it still is a lot of the rural votes that are coming in right now. Places like Rockdale, Henry, Clayton, Fulton have reported quite a lot of votes here, which are major Atlanta metro area counties. But places like we still haven't seen anything from Augusta and Richmond County. We haven't really seen that much from Savannah and Chatham County yet. We haven't seen a lot from certain counties yet that will still decide the fate of where the seat is.
Even to counteract, we still have a lot out in Forsyth and Cherokee and Bartow, all solidly Republican counties.
We have basically no early votes in from the Atlanta major Atlanta counties right now. That's a really big problem if you're going to project from these numbers. If Ossoff is polling over 60% in Cobb, this thing is probably done. But that's not really. I mean, that would be a significant shift in margin. But you gotta think some of that's going to go down a little bit.
It's too early in Cobb. There's no way he wins over 60%.
Yeah. But again, Hall. If I'm a Republican, what I'm looking for right here is the positive side. Trying to find some positives here. And it's not like it's complete doom at the moment. It's the early votes are looking better for Democrats than expected. You got to see if the election day will be more Republican than expected. But if you look at Hall County right now, 76% of the vote Republicans are getting around that margin. That's really, really good. That's a very good margin for them in a suburban county with a large population that they absolutely need to go for. Forsyth will also be a big one. Trump only got 71% of the vote in Hall County. Right now, 76% of the vote in Hall County. That's a pretty big improvement, although I don't know what the Senate races were. Forsyth County right now. Kelly Loeffler's at 76% almost in Forsyth County. That's a county that Republicans got under 70% in the general. If Republicans are going to get some improvements, it's going to need to come from Atlanta. It's going to need to come from election day results in places like Cherokee, places like Forsyth, like Hall, counties along those lines.
If you're a Republican and you're looking at this race right now, I would say the Republicans have still got a lot to look at in terms of looking forward to it. Right now, Ossoff's lead is about 12 points over for Purdue, if I'm just looking at this. And, that is technically above that D+11 limit. Again, a lot of these counties that we expect to break heavily for the Republicans haven't come in yet. We're talking about counties with significant populations, like Eric just mentioned, like Bartow, like Cherokee, the remainder of Forsyth County, the remainder of Hall County, and quite a few rural counties. I'm still fairly confident that those counties, as they come in, will be able to trim the total Dem lead going into this with just early votes to about D+11 or so, which a 1.3 million vote lead for Purdue would be enough to overcome, potentially with election day votes. I mean, that's what I would say the Republicans would be looking at now as their next strategy moving forward as we go up towards 50% of the total votes being counted.
Yeah, it's gonna be really important to see where these all kind of lie, where these set and where these lie. I just don't know if we really know where that's gonna be right now. So again, just gonna be really interesting to see just where everything is right now. Because again, I don't know if anyone really fully knows how these election day results are going to turn out.
Mm-hmm.
Still not much to report on here. Again, now that we get into the bare bones of this is when we start to wait, right, guys? This is where we start to wait now. As we start waiting on election day vote, this is where we kind of start to see the waiting period happen. This is where we start to see that happen and how it goes here.
Yep. Still, though, very fast counting. I mean, we're only an hour and a half into this election. It's not even 8:30 yet, and we already have near 50% of the votes counted.
Yeah, pretty admirable job counting so far.
Better than November for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right now.
Definitely much faster. November was a dumpster fire compared to this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also say,
Yes, Kraz?
Richmond, so
I think connection's a bit iffy, but I think Kratz is talking about the new drop in Richmond County, which is home to Augusta, which just came in. About 80% of the vote right now going to Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. Again, probably going to go down, but we have to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
For reference, looking back at November, Richmond County was about 66% of the vote went to the Democrats or went to John Ossoff.
Mm-hmm. What's the other race look like? The Public Service Commissioner. How is that one looking?
I haven't checked because I don't know where to get the results, but I will look.
I think USA Today might have some.
I'll check 1 second. Yeah, so at the moment, it looks like the Republicans, if they win any race, could actually win Public Service Commissioner District 4. Because Daniel Blackman only has 54% of the vote right now, which is below Ossoff and Warnock.
Wow.
Which makes sense because at the end, Bubba McDonald performed better than Perdue and the combined Republican vote, looking at it, or at least better than most of the combined prominent Republican vote prior to these runoffs in his November performance.
Yep. And this is basically a sort of elected body that covers public utilities. It's one of those weird statewide offices that exists, and they're popularly elected, and it's kind of odd in what it does. I think it's kind of like the Texas Railroad Commission doesn't actually deal with railroads a whole lot anymore. Deals with other things, I think oil and gas in particular. That's the sort of thing we're looking at here. It looks like we got some results out of Paulding County. That's one of those exurban ring counties around Detroit, or not around Atlanta.
Detroit.
Around Douglas County is where it would be located next to it. Another Democratic trending county in the Atlanta area. And right now, Perdue is at 66% of the vote in Paulding. Trump got 64% in this county. So that would be an improvement off of Trump, although I don't know how that went in the runoff, in the Senate election there. But the Republican
Paulding County in the prior election gave Perdue 63% of the vote.
Yeah, so this is one way the Republicans will get back in this thing is by improving their margins in these exurban counties, as well as cutting back some of that advantage in Atlanta through election day vote, which there isn't a whole lot of, which you could either assume is all the Democrats voted early, and all the Republicans are voting on Election Day, which could equalize.
That's
some of the
pretty
results
much
in those
what
counties.
it's been at this point. If I had to split it up, it's what I expected on our Q&A session prior to this, and a lot of people didn't expect it because it seems like a cliche, like a doomer thing to say, but it's true. It is true. I mean, if you look at the breakdown, voters are voting predominantly based off of what the majority of their party in Georgia and federally see as the most sound way of conducting an election.
Yeah, I really want to see some results out of Forsyth County whenever they go in. Keep in mind, there are probably voters that are out in line still voting in some of these places, perhaps. There are reasons that the voting has not come in this time, but it is a trend at this point. If you look at these counties that surround it, which be, if you go off the results right now, Fayette County is a little bit to the right. Paulding's a little bit to the right. Hall is a little bit to the right. Forsyth, only 4%. If this holds, would be very, very far to the right from the actual general election. I think the only other county you can kind of look at around here is Carroll County, which is around the Exer, another county that touches Fulton County. Or if it doesn't touch Fulton, it touches Douglas. I'm going to see how this one voted as well. But yeah, that's basically the once these Atlanta votes start coming in, we'll get a much better idea of what this is actually going to look like. We have a small edge to Warnock and Ossoff right now, particularly to Warnock. But you know, as these results come in, you definitely there's going to be a little bit of a shift in some of these places.
Well, we know exactly how it's going to look at this point. I mean, we've got counties like Fayette in the south, Paulding. We don't have Bartow or Cherokee, barely any in Forsyth, and we have Hall still has half the votes in. Compare that against Fulton or even Clayton, counties that really made the difference for Joe Biden in the presidential election, where you have over 80% of the votes in. So I can tell you how this is going to go. It's going to become very close, very fast. And once we start seeing the last of these rural counties come in with election day votes, even if it's not that many, together, well, they may be small and insignificant on their own. Together, they create a pretty big force. And when you combine them with these traditionally still solidly Republican counties in the exurban band around the Atlanta metro area, could be enough to really tighten up these races. And I still think ultimately in the end, enough for the Republicans to win at least one, if not both of the runoffs.
If you look at this right here, Oconee County, which is around the Athens area, is up. So far, it's 99% reporting. It's up from 66 to 32% Trump in the general to 68.5 to 31.5 for Purdue. That's 91% turnout from November, and it's looking a little bit better overall than Republicans. So that's the caution here, and why the needle hasn't fully shifted overwhelmingly Democratic. It's kind of hovering around 1% for Warnock and around 0.5 to 0.7% win for Ossoff. We got around 46% of the vote in, but if you look at the New York Times right now, they're saying the election day votes are around 3% of the vote right now. 15% is mail-in, 25% is early vote. That's what they're estimating at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a mixed bag almost to me right now. I don't know what you're looking at. You're more of a number guys than me right now, Eric, but I know what you're looking at right now. But it feels like a mixed bag, you know, kind of all around. Some places look good for Democrats and bad for Republicans. Some places look good for Republicans and bad for Democrats. That to me really does sound like we're going to be in for no matter what happens. A point in either race here, a point to the side either way, which it goes right now. That's what that's kind of what I'm feeling right now. I don't know about you, but that's kind of where I'm feeling at right now.
Honestly, I'm excited. This is going to be big for Elections Daily if we end up getting both of these correct, and I do think we will end up getting both races correct. Given
I'm not sure. We need to really look at where, again, Atlanta is going to tell the story here. Once this gets to that point, we'll make a judgment as to what the thing is looking like. But right now, I would definitely rather be the Democrats than the Republicans for sure. But there's still a chance to get back into the thing. So, you know, we'll see.
Yeah, I will say, just to chime in, sorry I cut out for a second, that there's something of an interesting dynamic going on here. So in Oconee County, which is outside of Athens, heavily Republican, suburban, exurban county, David Perdue is going to win that county. Almost all the votes are in. He's going to win that county by 37%, which is better than Trump's 33% win. So good news for ours. Of course, the flip side to that, though, in this 50% college-educated county, is Perdue won that county by 38.5 himself in November. So outrunning Trump, this heavily college-educated GOP county, but underrunning his own November margin. So a little bit of a convergence of the results there. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to be really interesting to see where these numbers are kind of going to lie here. It'd be really fascinating to see somehow if someone like David Perdue was able to survive tonight because maybe he does better, slightly better in the Atlanta area than what we expected him to, but then Kelly Loeffler loses because Perdue just outperforms her there. Something's telling me right now. Something's telling me in my gut that's not a possibility. That is out of order right now. This is quite. I feel like this is quite possibly something that is very much a possibility. I've said time and time again, I thought this scenario was underlooked. I thought with knowing what David Perdue, what his normal base is compared to Kelly Loeffler, knowing what this could be, I feel like, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I have this kind of feeling right now, we might see a split result when all these votes are counted. And if it is going to be a split result, it is clearly to me going to be David Perdue and then Raphael Warnock. And it would not surprise me if some of these suburban wine moms or these white-collar dads that we talk about in these suburban Atlanta metro counties split their ballots. I really don't think that's something that should surprise anyone right now if you're watching these numbers.
Mm-hmm. But I would, again, make it right now. I think if you're Loeffler, I don't think this is the situation Loeffler would prefer to be in. Perdue is definitely in a better position to overcome this deficit, specifically given his relative strength in Atlanta area. Yeah. But Loeffler is definitely underperforming relative to things. The big problem here is Republican turnout right now at the moment. Democrats are just turning out better. We talked about this in the article. It kind of goes down to turnout. Both parties need to turn out their base voters. Right now, Democrats are doing a better job at doing that than Republicans are. Republicans in a lot of these counties are pulling a little bit under where they did in November, where Democrats are pulling less. They're losing voters at a smaller margin than Republicans are. That's fine when you think of it. If Perdue won the actual general vote by around 1.5%, 2%, but can factor in the Trump factor. You really need to be doing a little bit better in these counties than right now.
Yeah, I will also say, we were talking about Perdue's relative strength in Atlanta. Some of that comes from his strength with college white voters. I will note that right now in Oconee County, which is that red county I talked about, 50% college educated. Perdue is up by 37, but Loeffler is up by only 35.5. So about a 1.5%, 2% difference there. Not a ton, but does show maybe that Perdue has some residual strength with college-educated whites that Loeffler just does not, and that would make some sense. Me and Joe actually talked about this on the podcast the other day, was that Perdue has a little bit of an older brand. He's been around since 2014. He's in a connected GOP political family. He's a pretty generic, rich businessman that ran for office. He has bigger connections to those types of voters than Loeffler does, who was appointed only a few months ago and almost immediately leaned hard into the Trump loyalist angle. So in a way, this does make some sense. We've talked about this before, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it continue into Atlanta.
Yeah, but just looking at the data right now, this is definitely, I think Sean T from Real Clear Politics put it this way, which is that Ossoff basically needs to run 0.9% ahead from where he was in the first round to win. Right now he's pulling about 1.1% ahead. And obviously, Warnock is doing better than that.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's just where, again, I think we discussed needs to be, could we see a split result tonight? And these are the type of numbers that, in my opinion, that if David Perdue gets some of these numbers that he needs in the Atlanta area when it comes down to turnout when it in the Atlanta Metro on election day, this is the type of numbers that are showing a split result is plausible. I really do think we're starting to see these numbers. If it does see this, I'm gonna feel a little bit more, resounded. I've been talking about this, it feels like, for a couple of weeks now. I really do have this feeling that we could be if we maybe do a slight Republican uptick here from what we're seeing right now, we really could be heading towards a split result tonight.
And another unusual thing for those who are keeping attention to the internal dynamics in the Republican Party in Georgia. Last night, whenever Brian Kemp was mentioned at the Trump rally, there was a lot of really negative reaction to it, to say the least. But at the watch party tonight in Atlanta, being greeted very positively by the crowd there. There's definitely a split here, I think, between that kind of the Trump voters who will go out and vote for Trump, the new white working class voters that are in the camp for Trump, and the suburban voters who have traditionally been the bedrock of the Republican Party in Georgia. In the short term, for 2016, maybe trading in some of those suburban voters for low propensity white working class voters might have been a reasonable idea. But the problem is, it's the same problem Obama ran into when he wasn't on the ballot. The Obama coalition did not show up. Right now, we're at a couple of elections where Trump is not on the ballot. His coalition is not showing up to the numbers you would expect them to, or that you would want them to do to win. And that's maybe the problem with running a personality. I guess I'll call it a personality cult, for lack of a better term. When you're running such a personality-focused campaign, making your face of the party one individual only, and relying on their most stringent supporters to win you elections, that's only fine as long as you're winning elections and as long as that person's name is on the ballot.
Honestly, I don't buy it right now. I mean, it's still, I think the dooming is still too early. I mean, we've still got counties like, look at Walton County, 50,000 votes. 50,000 votes cast there last November. Purdue won 76% of the vote there. We're still waiting on Forsyth. We're still waiting on the rest of Hall County. We're still waiting on, we have no votes out of Cherokee County or Bartow County. I highly doubt John Ossoff is going to win Gwinnett by 70 points, given that Biden only won Gwinnett by 18 points. Same with Cobb. So I really only think the Democrats are going to fall as we get more of these votes into the Atlanta area, because honestly, I really don't think that many of the that many people in the Democratic coalition in counties like Cobb and Gwinnett did vote in person today. I think most of them overwhelmingly voted before the election, and this is why we're seeing such disproportionate results. So with David Perdue getting closer to 47%, I have no doubt that he could overcome that 6% deficit to John Ossoff. And while he's definitely in a better position than Kelly Loeffler, it's still way too early to be dooming, and I don't think it's a good idea that we should be giving any advantage to either side.
Oh, I'm not dooming right now. I'm just pointing out more specifically the specific problems that you have with this coalition in Georgia.
We can't judge problems. We can't judge
the Democratic
problems
coalition in Georgia right now is black voters who almost always turn out, and suburban voters who almost always turn out. The Republican coalition is some suburban whites, a lot of exurban whites, and basically all of the rural whites. The problem is rural whites are traditionally in American politics the most fickle and least reliable group of voters out there. They turn out when they want to turn out, and if they don't turn out and your coalition relies on that, you're kind of screwed. There's still time to correct that, of course, and there's still time for votes to come in, but I think we're nearing the point where Republicans have less of a margin of error than they did before. They need these Atlanta results to be good. They need those counties like Cherokee and Bartow to come in really big, Forsyth for that matter, and they need some of these other results downstate, upstate to show more of a turnout for Republicans.
That's why I'm saying the Democrats have hit their point. They're not going to do any better than they're doing now, because these margins.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I would not expect Warnock to win by more than a point and a half if he wins this race at all. Right now he's up by about
we're at half the points. We're at half the vote right now. So we're entering the third quarter. This is essentially the quarter where we see Democratic margins fall to normal levels. And when I say normal, I mean more reminiscent of the November elections in the rest of the Atlanta metro. And we start to see the metro areas finish counting up their votes. And also for the Republicans, we'll see a continuing uptick with Election Day votes. Pretty much, I would also be looking out for, again, heavily Republican counties. People forget about Walton County. 50,000 votes will go a long way in a race like this. And Purdue's just now at almost 47% of the vote because we got a drop in Bartow County. Purdue's winning 84-15. And that helped Loeffler as well, even though Loeffler's doing about half, maybe 0.1% worse in Bartow County. Still, it's still definitely an election up for grabs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, we're basically at halftime here. So there's time to make things up, but as the game goes on and as more votes come in, that margin continues to change a little bit. Right now, the Needle, the New York Times Needle, has about Warnock 1.1% and Ossoff 0.6%. Those are very, very close races. If you look down at the votes outstanding, specifically the thing they mentioned, I think Nate Cohn has mentioned this, is that right now Purdue would need to win about 53% of the remaining votes to win the race. And he's on track to win between 48 and 58%, and their guess is 53. For Loeffler, it's a little bit different, of course. Loeffler is running a little bit behind of where Purdue is. She needed to win about 54%, and right now she's at 53. So these are still very, very close races at the moment. Obviously, we're waiting as the results come in. We get a clearer and clearer picture every time more counties come in, more votes come in.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't project on making a call on these races anytime soon. I mean, these are very, very close right now. We've actually got some of our first results out of Bartow County.
Mm-hmm.
Bartow is obviously, it's one of the ex-urban counties. And right now, 9% of the votes in. Purdue has about 84.6% of the vote. And Loeffler has about 84.5% of the vote. This is a large county, about 100,000 people. And voted for Republicans in the general election, voted for Trump, about 75 to 24. I'm not sure how it voted in the in the general election within the Loeffler race or in the Purdue race, but this is higher than Trump got. Obviously, you want it to be higher than Purdue got for sure.
Wait, sorry. So, are the votes from that county, are they election day or early or mail?
I am not sure.
It's probably early.
I'm looking at Decision Desk HQ right now. That's where I'm getting these county results from.
At this point, we're starting to get all of the votes in, though. It's not going to matter as much where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're at 52% in. It's not even 9 o'clock. This race can be wrapped up and done at 11:30, 11 o'clock. Maybe even earlier. I don't know. This is counting very fast. I mean, we've had essentially 12% more, near 15% of the votes counted in 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe give some credit to Brad Raffensperger tonight for helping get some crap fixed, maybe, and to let the count go quickly tonight. In some of these, especially in these suburban counties where we know the counting was pretty slow. So, it's nice to at least see that, in my opinion, that, these states are going to improve. We're going to see early voting and mail-in voting be used more and more in more states as we go on in these years. And it's good when we see places like Georgia improve. It's good when we have, places improving the way they count ballots and the way that they report them. That's going to stop a lot of what happened, after election night, in which we waited, many days, because of all these mail-in ballots. If we let these places and these workers who do a lot of great work, count their stuff earlier, we're going to get nights like these in which we're going to know results, and we won't have kind of the shift in the issues that we had this year. That's kind of this past year. That's kind of just the major truth of it. And if this does start to see an improvement in Georgia, I think that's a good thing for the world.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to point out here is this decision that these states made to count the early votes last was, I believe, political malpractice. It was stupidity, to be sure, but it opened it up to all sorts of conspiracy theories about how the election goes. Right now, they're counting the early votes. They're counting the election day votes roughly the same time. North Carolina, all the early votes basically go in first. They open themselves up to a situation where you could have a candidate who does not know what he's talking about, objectively speaking, as Jenya Coulter wrote in an article for us earlier today, make a bunch of claims about these votes that don't hold a lot of water. Yeah, the votes are overwhelmingly Democratic, but they would have been overwhelmingly Democratic whether they came in first or came in last. The only difference is that they chose to make them the votes that were counted first be counted last. Realistically speaking, that doesn't make a lot of sense. There wasn't a whole lot of reason for it, and it was very unfortunate what has come as a result of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder if some states too will move towards trying to report either all their votes in rapid succession or just do them all at once. I mean, obviously this was more on the GOP side this year, but some of our older viewers, for lack of a better term, will recall that back in like I think 2014 or 2015, in Wisconsin, late arriving ballots in Waukesha County gave the GOP a very narrow win in a critical state Supreme Court race. And there were people talking for years on the Dem side that, the county clerk fabricated the votes or that they were, made up. And so I do think states in general will move towards faster reporting, or at least reporting all their votes at once, as opposed to saying, oh, here's this piece and this piece.
I don't want him to report. That means that takes the fun out of nights like this. I don't want him to report.
Everyone needs to go to 2 states. Actually, 3 states: Florida, Texas, and North Carolina. In fact, 2 states need to do that right now: California and New York. Get your act together. Go down to Florida. Figure out what they're doing.
We shouldn't have states like New York where it takes like 8 months to finish counting the ballots and then never get certified.
There are countries with far larger populations than California and New York that operate their elections very quickly. Heck, Texas is larger than New York, and they operate their elections very quickly. Florida knows what they're doing. They have an excellent election administration. Go down to them, learn what they've done.
Well, you know what it took from Florida? It took the 2000 debacle. I think it was Jeb Bush who said that after 2000, Republicans ended up winning that race, obviously, but Republicans that controlled the state vastly reformed their entire election system after 2000 and have continued to make reforms. I mean, Republicans were the ones in Florida that instituted expanded in-person early voting after they lost the state in 2012. So I feel like the Florida GOP, one of the reasons that they run their elections so well is partly because the Florida GOP, who's controlled the state for decades now, took an interest in expanded access and quicker reporting because of 2000, because they viewed their voters as more likely to come out if there was expanded early in-person voting. So I think states will move towards a Florida model.
One thing we can all agree upon, I think, is that overall, the model that was followed in some of these states, in California and New York, where they just count ballots at the pace slower than molasses, and or even better, asphalt. There's this science experiment. It keeps track of pitch and see how long it could fall. It feels like that's going to fall quicker than we're going to learn at what's happened in New York 22. But also the states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, where they just decided to be complete morons with how they were counting their votes, that shouldn't be a thing either. They should take a look at this embarrassment that happened that was wrought upon them by their own decision and say, how are we going to fix this? And the big thing with those states, they have divided legislatures, divided executives. Michigan, Democratic Senate, Republican legislature. Democratic governor, Republican legislature. Same story in Wisconsin, same story in Pennsylvania. All that's fixable if you just get people to the table, get them to agree what we're going to do, how we're going to count things, and make us clear exactly what's going on, so someone can't come up and make ridiculous claims because of a decision the legislature made how it was going to count votes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Eric. Legislators, it needs to be a full-on change, like you said, that was in Florida, that, hey, look, this is unacceptable. We can't be doing this type of stuff. It's just wrong for us to do it. It makes us look weak. It makes our state look bad. Let's, create some change that I think will honestly, in the end, make our states look better and have our elections work better. That's kind of the stuff that is all, states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan are only going to be more and more important for this next decade. Those 3 states are going to be very critical this next decade when it comes to swings in the 2 presidential races we will experience in the 2020s. 2024 and 2028, those 3 states will be hugely critical. And if they cannot produce results in a good amount of time, we're going to have a problem. That's just kind of the honest answer there. We're going to have a problem, and these states need to fix it.
Oh, not to break up the conversation, but the New York Times has updated their needle. It's giving Dems a little bit better of a chance now as more results roll in. I'll also note one thing, because I was just discussing this with someone. The reason that I would say I'd rather be Dems right now, when you look at the only county that is highly educated and fully reporting, that's Oconee County outside Athens, Georgia, where the University of Georgia is. Purdue's running 1.5% behind his own November margin. And that's like the most Republican, most educated county in the state. And so obviously it ain't over till it's over. And we got a lot of votes left to go, especially election day votes out of Atlanta. But if Purdue and Loeffler want the Atlanta Metro to save them, it's got to be on the back of those college educated whites. And Oconee does not, the results in Oconee don't bode super well, but again, it's not in Atlanta. So
I'm going to say it now. If we get a Republican win tonight, it's going to be in at least one of the races in the Purdue race. I would honestly, at this point, looking at how close the race is getting in the for the Class 2 seat and looking at where Republicans still have votes outstanding, I would be very surprised if Purdue ended up not winning this race. I could see
I would be more
Honestly,
surprised than not if Loeffler came back and won. I think Purdue, out of the candidates here, has the best shot of doing it, and that's because of his
That's what I'm
unique appeal in the Atlanta area.
that I expect Purdue to win.
But he can't be running. He can't be running a point and a half behind in these areas. He is doing a little bit better if you look at the votes right now in places like Fayette County, which is actually a pretty big deal. That's a county that is long-term shifting.
You understand that John Ossoff is only at 51.6% of the vote right now, even though he has almost 70% of the vote in Cobb County and Gwinnett County, both of which did not go to Democrats by more than 11% and 18% respectively in the 2020 presidential race.
Again, it's clearly not even close to being over. Just judging at the results right now, the closer you get to the end, the closer these elections are going to seem, and the close, some of this along this line.
It's too early. Well, at this point, it's not too early anymore. It's too close.
At this point, we got to see. I mean, 58% of the vote is apparently in at this point. At this point, it's not just too close anymore. It's not just too early.
Again, though, I just don't see Ossoff winning. He's only up 51.5 to 48.5, and I don't see him holding these margins in the Atlanta metro. It's just the
big needle shift here. We just got
way too
Ossoff
extreme.
shifted back 2 points to the right, 0.6% from 0.8%. Cherokee
and Walton aren't in either. Those are both counties where Republicans get above 75% of the vote.
No, I'm talking about this needle shift. The needle shifts usually coincide with new votes coming in.
Yeah,
and this is shifted back to like 0.8% Ossoff. Now it's back to 0.6%.
Mm-hmm. I know I sound like a broken record now, but I'm just going to become Josh Krishar against the grain here. I genuinely think the Republicans are going to be fine.
Fayette. So interestingly, Fayette, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to get a clear picture. On the early in-person votes there, it looks like Ossoff is running ahead of his November margin by about 6 points, or 5 or 6 points. But then we still have a substantial amount of election day to go. But we just got a mail drop. So right now, Fayette is 53-47 Purdue, with some election day to go. It was basically 54-44 in November. So that's what Ossoff needs if it holds, but it will almost certainly not. I think that when all the election day votes are counted, according to the New York Times, 35. It should creep up back closer to 54-46, I think. They say there's only about 8,000 votes left to count there. So, again, in highly educated – what?
I was just going to add that Purdue did about 0.4% better last time. Like you said, he got 53.7, 44.5. So, I think it's another thing to look. Will that last 7% of outstanding votes in Fayette end up splitting that back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think right now we're starting to get a clearer picture of how the things are going right now. The votes keep creeping back in.
Interesting. Look at Newton. Guys, look at Newton County.
Where's Newton?
It's right below Rockdale, but this was a county that Ossoff won 53-43 last time, I believe, or 54-43, and Purdue is at about 46.8% of the vote there, with more than half the vote in. So. Again, that's kind of interesting to see. I don't know if it's going to hold. I honestly doubt it's going to hold for the reverse reason of Fayette. But
that would be something Republicans would want to do if they could claw back in a place like Newton. This is a similar size to a county. This is a similar size to a county like Bartow. This is a county that Trump lost by almost 11%. He lost it by 10.9%. If they could claw back to a smaller margin there, that's how you start making up for some of these declines in rural areas. But that's a big if.
I will caution again, though, according to the New York Times, the stuff from Newton is entirely early in-person and election day. So the mail-ins, the New York Times thinks are going to break for Ossoff 74-26, so almost by a 50-point margin. And I don't know what percent of the vote that is exactly. I think using rough estimates, that's about a quarter of the vote. So if that's a quarter of the vote,
plus 12 win or so.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up probably a little bit better for Ossoff than where it was. I mean, similar to Fayette for Purdue, right? Purdue's running very close to his numbers from November in Fayette. Ossoff's going to run very close to his numbers in Newton. But I guess we'll see when the mail ballots come in.
It's still a lot of good things for Republicans in and around in these exurban counties. I mean, look at Forsyth still. You've still got 86% of the votes left to be counted in Forsyth, none in Walton County, none in Cherokee County. You still got 91% left to count in Bartow County and 24% in Hall County. And of course, still, the big thing I'm watching right now is when will inevitably the Ossoff margins in Gwinnett and Cobb drop by about 10 points. Because I could see Ossoff winning Gwinnett 58-42 or something like that, or by more than that. But I don't see a 67-32 win. So I'm just wondering when we get into the next update from there, will it confirm my suspicion that we'll see roughly a 10-point drop for the Democrats in both those counties? So that would mean Ossoff going from 66-56 in Cobb and 67-57 in Gwinnett. Obviously, we still expect these counties to vote Democratic by double digits, but it makes a difference when you have a race that's starting to become really close like this. The margin really does make a big difference.
I feel like you're still waiting on Forsyth and Bartow, and you still got just some of these North Jordan counties. They're still out there. It'll be interesting to see how they report, when they report. We're up to 60 counted in both races right now, so we're really. I really do think. I mean, it's only just turned 9 o'clock. I really do think by 10:30, 11 o'clock, we might be able to make rejection here, folks.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. But adding on to what I still think is another positive thing Republicans can look at, there are still quite a few rural counties in North Georgia, not that many votes overall, but enough to make a difference in a race that's decided by potentially less than half of 1%. I mean, just go buzz through some of these North Georgia counties according to Decision Desk. Most of them are in at this point, but you still have some that are waiting to count. Whitfield County is only 14% in. Fannin County, 77% in. Gilmer, 57%. Pick another one. Look at Lumpkin County, 0% in. Two more, Banks County and Stevens County, 0% in. So, again, and the race just tightened again. Purdue just cracked 49%. So we're looking at a race now that's decided by under 2 percentage points, and it's only going to get closer from here. So I stand by my opinion, my bold opinion, that our call will be correct in at least one of these races.
I really don't know. I trust the needle here. The needle saying Slim Ossoff.
I don't trust the needle.
Yeah,
and Slim Warnock.
It's super close right now, according to New York Times. 21,000 votes between Ossoff and Purdue right now.
Honestly, I don't trust the New York Times.
That's about.
I will say though. So one of the things about the needle, I will say. So one of the reasons the New York Times is probably more bullish on Democrats than we are right now is that, according to them, yes, Ossoff's lead is very narrow, but their projected margins for Purdue in Cherokee and Forsyth and Bartow and Floyd and Paulding combined are going to get wiped out by DeKalb alone. And so that's why I think they're bullish, because they're getting data from all over the state, and they're basically saying that if Atlanta is in line with their projections, which is a big, big if. Remember, Republicans could easily overperform there.
That's the problem. They're assuming these ifs because they want us to support the narrative. That's why they're being bullish.
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, again, like I think there's a strong, there's a possibility maybe that DeKalb's turnout does cause significant problems for the GOP. If it's anything like the New York Times expects.
That is true. If I will say that there is one thing that will damage the GOP potentially, it is DeKalb, because it did outvote its November standings, and margin of 84% is not going to drop, whereas Ossoff's margins in Cobb and Gwinnett will drop. Big margins in DeKalb won't drop because it's heavily African-American and essentially the very essence of urban Atlanta Democrats in many ways. And Savannah just dropped, and 40% in. Not that big of a dent, honestly. Purdue just barely fell below 49%. But given that's more than a third of the total Savannah vote, and it's probably early vote, and Ossoff is at 68%, that's honestly not as big of a dent to Purdue as I was expecting. And given the vote's still outstanding, I would honestly say the only real threat to Purdue and Loeffler at this point is the rest of the votes in DeKalb County. That's pretty much it.
DeKalb is a problem for Republicans right now that's going to need to be corrected for. In the near future.
Yeah, I assume Chatham, which is where which is where Savannah is. I assume that's got to be mail-in vote because it's Ossoff plus 36.5. And that would be, sorry, let me check. I think, that would be certainly an improvement, I think. It was plus 29.5 or plus 29 Ossoff. So I'm pretty sure that's, or I'm pretty positive
that's going to drop. It's
mail-in
10% above. It's going to drop a bit. I mean, it's 10 points above where Biden got in Chatham County. So
so that'll drop. I'm going to need to see election day vote and also even early in person from there to really get a sense.
Yeah.
Trying to see where so it looks like at the moment, I'm trying to look through here where is this? Yeah, it's very, very close right now in terms of overall vote. According to the New York Times, it's now 3,000 votes between Perdue and Ossoff. Loeffler and Warnock is different. It's about 18,000 votes.
They do think, though. Sorry, go ahead.
And the needle has indeed shifted. It's 63% of the vote in, still back to 0.8% for Ossoff, 1.4% for Warnock.
And Perdue is back over 49% of the vote, along with, soon Loeffler, because Cherokee has started to come in.
Which one are you looking at? I'm looking at New York Times right now, and they seem to have more votes than Decision Desk right now. And they have it as literally a 3,000 or 2,700 vote race between Ossoff and Perdue at the moment.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Cherokee just came in that time.
Yeah, it's 49.98% compared to 50.02%. They still have Ossoff projected by a good margin because they're expecting that Atlanta vote. And obviously right now, if Loeffler is just running substantially behind Perdue at this point, to be sure.
Well, we'll see what ends up.
Yeah, so, sorry. Okay, so according to... sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
I just don't see the numbers, quite honestly, right now for Republicans. Harrison, I understand you feel bullish. Eric, I understand you feel bullish, but I just don't know if I see the
feel
numbers
bullish right now.
Then we're just going to have to saw off DeKalb County and turn it into a reservoir.
I'm not saying I feel bullish. I would pick the Democrats right now if I had to pick between the two. But again, we're at 63% of the vote right now. Lots of votes are still out. Republican margin of error is decreasing, but it's not out of the line yet for sure.
Yeah, I think
I'm probably closer to where I think Joe is a little bit further out than where I am right now, but the big one,
regardless of what happens tonight, there is a long-term problem for Republicans in Georgia, at least for the foreseeable future, and I would bet over the next decade and longer. So Republicans are going to have to start looking at new states to focus on if this holds up, and the Democrats do secure 1 or 2 victories tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the problem with Georgia long term, as we've written about, is that most of the population lives in the Atlanta area. The areas Republicans are gaining in are literally dying off, and their winning chances basically rely on low propensity turnout rural whites. And especially if the state party goes the way of the Arizona Republican Party, it's increasingly difficult to see them being credible when their top candidates coming out aren't people who've traditionally been successful, like, for example, Johnny Isakson, who had a grip on things, or even David Perdue had a pretty solid performance back in 2014, or Sonny Perdue.
Things have changed in the metro area since then, as you see by Perdue ridiculously performing his 2014 margins in the metro.
Yeah, it's Trump has alienated. He's expanded upon right now the problems that Republicans are facing with suburban areas. He's escalated that completely. And unlike in North Carolina or in some other states, there aren't a whole lot more rural white voters left to flip. Whereas there are plenty of college-educated voters who vote all the time and are flipping. That's not great long term. If Republicans can win back some rural black voters, great. But
So, okay, sorry. I have a big update because it looks like Rockdale, according to the New York Times and according to a tweet I just saw, is fully reporting. This is the first big metro Atlanta county to be fully reporting. In November, it was Purdue plus 40.5. And right now it's going to be, or sorry, my bad. It was Ossoff plus 40.5. And fully reporting, it is Ossoff plus 44, according to the New York Times.
Mm-hmm. Definitely not the number you want to see if you're on the Republican side. But again, when we discussed in our article, we were talking about our rating. This 1.1 million election day votes fits firmly into the category where Nate Cohn suggested would be toss up or leans or tilts Democratic. We don't use tilts, but we'll use it because he's used the term here. That's definitely what this is more looking like. If Republicans had found a way to bring out more voters, this wouldn't be as much in question as it is right now. If they brought in 1.2 million voters or 1.25 million voters, they'd probably be in a much better situation right now. And there's a lot of things you can blame for that, but I think one of them is the president deciding to talk about election fraud nonstop for a month. Say what you will, that's not something that helps turn out voters.
Yeah, I do have to wonder what the takes will be. If
we know what the takes will be, and we'll hear the gloating from the takes for the next 8 months.
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly the problem is that Loeffler was not Trumpy enough. If she had voted with Trump 101% of the time instead of 100% of the time, she would have won.
Nope, those are definitely not the takes we're going to
No, I think, you know what I think? I think the simplest take here is you have a president who, look, the result was in doubt for a little while, right? We didn't call the race immediately, it was in doubt. But after a couple days after Election Day, it was clear who was going to be the next president. But Trump has made everyone remember that he is, in fact, currently the president. And that's rare for an outgoing president. I mean, if you would ask people in December 2016 who's the president, I think 3/4 of the country would have said Donald Trump, even though he hadn't been inaugurated yet. So, look, this is it's far from over, but at the very least, this is going to be, I think, and even Harrison would agree with this. It's going to be too close for comfort, I think, for Republicans, even if they do pull out both these two races. I think the party's going to look at this.
Statewide victory they're going to have in the decade. I'll say that with confidence. I highly doubt that they'll be able to reliably have statewide victories, even in red waves going forward, if they can't secure these two races.
I'm going to bring it up now. I'm gonna say right now, I disagree with Kras. I think we're not going to make a call here as a website, but I honestly, personally, I think I'm almost seeing enough here. I really do not think there is a way here for the Republican Party to come back on either of these two seats. I believe that the Democrats, I think, have the numbers to flip these two seats. I'm looking at what I'm seeing right now on the New York Times. I'm seeing numbers. I'm seeing who's turning out. I don't see Republicans, having that number stuff. I think that, it's not there. And I really do think that, to me, it looks like Jon Ossoff, very narrowly at the very least, and Raphael Warnock by a slightly more expanded margin, I think, just seeming to look like is trending towards winning this race.
Well, on the bright side, at least we'll never have to hear about the 2020 election cycle again, and we can focus on New Jersey and Virginia.
But again, we've got 65% of the vote in. As we've said before, Republicans have time to narrow this, but the more stuff comes in, the more perfect they have to run the table here.
Mm-hmm.
If Loeffler, if Warnock and Ossoff do indeed win, then Ossoff would have a 6-year term. Warnock would have a 2-year term. We'd be up again in 2022. Along with another Republican state, which is a Republican state historically that flipped narrowly for Democrats this time, Arizona. He would be up at that cycle for a full 6-year term at that point. I think the 6-year term is the 6-year term that we're talking about is more valuable, certainly, than the 0.5 or than the 2-year term. So that is something to keep in mind here. One of these races will be back up in 2022, regardless of who the winner is. But if you're a Georgia Republican, you're probably not exactly thrilled at the idea of having to contest that seat again when you don't have a great bench right now.
Honestly, if you're a Georgia Republican, you might as well just move to Florida.
Move to North Carolina. We could use you up here. But no, the problem with
leave Georgia before it's too late.
The problem with the Georgia Republican Party right now is that it's built around a very Republican state like Arizona is. Its base are rural white voters who are very Republican. The likelihood they're going to nominate a candidate who is more amenable to Atlanta area moderates is thinning. Granted, they can probably be thankful at least that Doug Collins is probably going to try to primary Kemp instead of run for Senate. But that leaves who is going to run for Senate? Marjorie Taylor Greene? Buddy Carter in the first district maybe would probably be fairly credible, but he's
Barry Loudermilk. Let's give it to Loudermilk. That's a guy, right?
No, I agree with what we saw in the comments. Given how these results are panning out, 2022 probably will be potentially the last time there ever is a statewide elected victory in Georgia, at least for the foreseeable future. Because if the suburbs just keep getting bluer and these ex-urban counties keep getting bluer, like we've seen over the last 6 years at the presidential level, and even at the Senate level, I honestly don't see how can happen. So I say we just take all the Republicans from Georgia and fly them to New Jersey.
I will say another maybe not so great, but will get a little bit better, I guess, sign for Republicans is Paulding County is almost done counting. New York Times thinks about 6,000 votes total, about 5,000 of those election day, and Decision Desk thinks it's about 95% done counting. Right now, it's R plus 24, or 24 and a half, depending on the race. And in November, it was Purdue plus 29. So we're getting increasingly to the point where Republicans can still win, but they would need to really, really, really run the table in Metro Atlanta. We've got Rockdale almost pretty much entirely in, and it's a blue shift. We got Paulding almost entirely in, likely going to end up as a single-digit blue shift. So
DeKalb County, that's just the elephant in the room right here. It's turned into a massive problem at this point for Republicans. And as I predicted, the margins in Gwinnett and Cobb have started to drop slightly. So they're getting closer and closer to what I'd expect in the upper 50s range, below 60. And that's caused the race to tighten up quite significantly to the tune of about 12,000 votes or less. But when you have shifts in Rockdale, when you have Newton, which is going to start probably going to get back to about an 11, 12-point Ossoff win if those mail-ins break as heavily for the Democrats as we expected. And combine that again with DeKalb, where you've still got 70% of ballots left to be counted, then that's arguably too much to overcome, even when you have counties like Walton that are still out. I mean, Bartow's still out, good chunk of Forsyth is still out, but Hall County's mostly in, Cherokee County's mostly in, so it's close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to say the elephant in the room, like you said, DeKalb, obviously, but I honestly think the bigger elephant in the room right now is Forsyth
in the lead.
Oh, wow.
Was that from Spalding votes that came in, or?
I believe so. I think it was from Cherokee, because Cherokee's 95% in now.
Yeah, and Cherokee's underperforming where it would be if Republican. I mean, it's at 69.7% right now. Republicans probably want a better portion from Cherokee than that. But the needle still has it at Warnock plus 1.5, Ossoff plus 0.9. So the races are close right now, but they could very well, and the New York Times is predicting that they will go out later. We're at 67% reported right now. Again, the fact that someone is ahead right now does not mean they're ahead throughout the election. It also does not mean that the votes that come after the candidate that you like being ahead, that if any votes that come in after your candidate who was you liked, if any votes come in after that, that does not mean that they're all fraudulent and illegal votes that were put in to make your guy lose.
Yeah, so Cherokee, it looks like if Decision Desk is right and it's almost all done, it looks like it's going to be about a 3-point shift towards Democrats from the November Senate race, which is, again, I mean, you've got to, I mean, if you're Purdue and if you're Loeffler, what you have to have happen is you have to have the election day voters that came out today in DeKalb and Fulton be substantially redder than you expect, either because it was just every Republican in the county voting, mean, that's possible. Or something like what happened with Trump, where non-white voters shifted red when people didn't expect them. Now, we haven't seen that in other parts of the state. But if Purdue and Loeffler want to pull this out, that's probably part of their path right now, is doing way better in
Bolton. There's just not enough left.
But yeah, we actually just had a big mail-in dump in Forsyth County. Republicans are now only winning Forsyth by 5. We expect this to change, of course. The mail-ins are always going to be Democratic in this county, as in the rest of Georgia for the most part. There's still 79% of the vote left to count in Forsyth County. And there's several counties that haven't reported yet, like Floyd County, Lumpkin, Coffee, Aping, another Atlanta area one, Walton County, and then a few others in the southern part of the state, like Taylor and Stewart, and one other county right here, Quitman County. But Republicans are going to want to they're going to want to do better in these counties than they're doing right now if they want to hold where they are right now, which is a narrow Purdue advantage. But the Needle obviously expects those DeKalb votes to shift things back into Ossoff's favor. And right now, even it's worth noting, even with a 15,000 vote lead for Purdue right now, if you look at the other election here, which is the Warnock race, the Warnock-Loeffler contest, that's... Oh, actually, there's more... Did more votes come in?
From where?
Oh, it looks like more votes came in. It seems like it's shifted. Oh, no, it's back. Sorry, this is kind of loading up strange. So, Warnock is ahead by 5,900 votes right now, whereas Purdue's up by around 15,000 votes. So, Loeffler is running substantially behind where Purdue is, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that is undeniable at this point. And if you're Kelly Loeffler, you are not at all happy with how things are going right now, especially running up against a candidate who you had Oppo on. You used the Oppo nonstop.
Honestly, Eric, Oppo just doesn't matter anymore. People are so partisan on both sides that literally Warnock could have run over someone with a bus if people would vote for him.
Yep. So
well, based on the Oppo we heard, he might have actually run over someone with or their foot with a car, depending on if you believe the Oppo.
But I mean, clearly this Oppo didn't do anything. So honestly,
it makes you
wonder how effective really is opposition research at this point anymore, given the extent, at least for federal races, not as much for state races, for legislative races. You know, there's still ticket splitting between Congress and other aspects of the federal system, like president. But overall, for federal races, polarization's just started to make Oppo kind of useless. People are voting for candidates because of the not them mentality. That makes up a big chunk of our electorate in this country, on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, as we continue just kind of to fill out here, you know, we're almost at 70% reporting in both races now.
Sorry, Joe, big news. Walton County is in. Purdue right now, 67% in. Purdue's at 71% of the vote. Walton County gave Trump 74% of the vote, and Purdue got about 73.7% back in November here. So that is a small Dem shift, but it is still a significant amount of raw votes to net the GOP for both Loeffler and Purdue, and it has actually been enough to put Loeffler narrowly in the lead over Warnock with about 70% of the vote in. And given it's not even 9:30 yet, I would highly expect we're going to have a call within the next hour, given how fast it's being counted.
If we're looking at what's going on right now, Cherokee County has 96% of the votes in. It's basically identical in margin to what it was getting in November. That's not what you want if you're a Republican. There's still 4% of the vote left. Hopefully, if you're a Republican, that would push it above 70 at least. Forsyth is 5 points right now. That's after the mail-ins came in.
Very narrow. First lead of the night.
I just don't see the numbers here for Republicans. I really, truly don't. I truly don't.
At least I'm. Loeffler definitely has a problem. The Needle has Ossoff up. I think the probability they have things at is about 64% Ossoff right now, and then the Warnock race, I think they have it around 70%. So that's kind of the difference in the confidence we're talking about here between those two races. But yeah, Republicans, if they're wanting to win these two races, they're going to need to hope those drops out of Fulton, out of DeKalb, out of Gwinnett, and out of DeKalb County, out of Gwinnett and out of Cobb are specifically, are going to be better for them than the previous ones, and they need to be better by a significant margin.
Of course, DeKalb is just going to sit here and we won't have any updates from DeKalb, the one county we want to have updates from for like 30 minutes.
Well, yeah, DeKalb is kind of the sticking point here, to be sure.
Yeah.
I'll also note something too. Looking at counties like Douglas and Cherokee, it looks like Loeffler does have a college-educated white voter problem, or at least a suburban problem. Maybe it's not specifically white voters, but a suburban problem. I mean, again, me and Joe talked about this, and this is maybe one of the few times this year where their conventional wisdom about a candidate will end up being right when the results come in. I mean, but look at these numbers. It's undeniable. Cherokee is Purdue plus a little over 39, but it's only Loeffler plus 38. Douglas is Ossoff plus 30.5, but it's Warnock plus 31.2. So it's not huge differences, but Loeffler is, Ossoff's only at 29.5. So it's not huge, but it's enough that the conventional wisdom kind of held up, which is Loeffler is a newer face politician, doesn't have the same, street cred or credit, so to speak, with the educated suburban wealthy crowd that maybe Purdue still has some residual amount of. And she leaned really hard into the culture war. And that's, and that seems to be showing itself in these suburban counties.
Yeah, Kelly Loeffler proved herself to be a weak candidate. That's all I can really say in the matter. Maybe Brian Kemp should have appointed Doug Collins.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the practical.
Honestly, bro, I don't know if it would save Doug Collins at this point. If David Perdue's on the verge of potentially losing, I don't see Doug Collins doing any better than the two of them.
You mean Brian Kemp?
No. Joe said that if Doug Collins had been appointed to the seat,
no,
Doug Collins would do potentially better than.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we would have probably avoided a little bit more pain, a little less drama, maybe.
I mean, Doug Collins can primary Brian Kemp in 2022. It'll be interesting to see.
I don't know if it'll matter in Georgia, honestly, right now anymore. Even in a theoretically Republican-leaning year, this it feels like 2013 in Virginia. Is this the night that Georgia officially transformed itself into a rapidly shifting blue state? This might be the night where we look back on it and say, yes, I feel like that night could be the night.
Let's look at things this way: is if we're looking at a Senate right here, if we're looking at a 50-50 Senate. That's really a very tenuous majority for anyone. You have one basically reconciliation bill you can pass. Committees are going to be even. If we're going off the 2001 rules, committees are going to be evenly split. McConnell is definitely going to push for that if that's the case. And if Democrats want to break that, that's fine. They just have to consider that next time that comes, that they would be locked out as well. And your median votes in the Senate would be people who are vulnerable and up in 2022. Would be your Maggie Hassans if Chris Sununu runs, your Mark Kellys, your Raphael Warnocks in this case, who ran on a very, very progressive platform but will be up again in 2022. Those would be the median votes, along with people like Joe Manchin, John Tester. That would be who would basically be controlling the agenda in the Senate and what things can get passed and what things won't get passed. We haven't had a 50-50 Senate in a long time, and if the needles are correct here and Democrats do manage to win both of these races, we're in for a very, very fractious and unusual Senate term, to put it lightly.
And given how the House majority is, it's essentially going to be divided government, not divided government if the Democrats take the Senate, but just slim majority hell, essentially, is what we're going to be in for the next at least 2 years. Either way.
Well, so I will say a couple things.
Put it this way, the House is so... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple things on that. I think the only thing that might change from 2001 is I think Democrats would ask for either an agreement informally or or an outright majority on the committee so that Biden's Supreme Court nominee, because he will have one, Breyer, is almost certainly going to retire. He's 82 and wants to retire, gets a vote on the floor, because I don't think Dems are going to risk a situation where Breyer retires and Biden's nominee sits in a deadlocked committee for 4 years. So that's probably the biggest one to watch if there is a tied Senate.
Yeah. And another thing to keep in mind here is this unusual. I mean, the House is so thin that a couple of House representatives dying would be enough to flip the House. And you could call a vote of no confidence or whatever you want to do and flip the speaker. If somehow 5 seats or 6 seats flip, if there's vacancies, people resign because of scandal. That happens all the time. We had, I believe, 10 vacancies as of the general election or so. Right now, the majority is thinner than that. And in the Senate, obviously, if any one senator resigns or any one senator dies, that changes the entire makeup of things. Or a senator switches parties. That's not really likely in any of these races. It'd be hard to picture any senator switching parties, and it would almost certainly seen as an act of war by that person, and the party would go all out against them. But the Senate majority would literally be within the hands of one person.
Pretty much. When you look at the swing votes in the Senate, that's up for grabs, unless we have something like Lisa Murkowski, who may become an independent and caucus with the Democrats if they take the majority with these 2 seats. I've heard that's in the cards. Now that Alaska's gotten rid of its primary rules and has a jungle primary, she could run on name recognition without risking losing a primary like she did in 2010. So that's also in the cards, and that would give the Democrats an outright majority without the need for a split. And that would only really happen, I think, it would make sense. I mean, we have to see first whether or not there's a split delegation or whether or not both seats end up going to the Democrats. But going forward, Republicans need to move on from Georgia at this point and look elsewhere, because Georgia is definitely not moving toward them and has essentially rapidly become toxic. They've become toxic in one of the key areas of the state, the metro, that makes up more than half the population, and that's basically death in Georgia. So these things aren't going to change overnight, looking at how it's going.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's too much there. Purdue and Loeffler, the banking in the rural area is just not there. It does feel like game over. Currently, in my opinion, I don't know what it's going to take here, but now we're saying 76% of the vote is in, and it's tied, and so much of the remaining vote is in the Atlanta area. DeKalb is only 35% in. Cobb is only 49% in. Fulton hasn't reported everything yet. Clayton hasn't reported everything yet. It's less than, as we continue to go on. It's just less and less and less now from where it could be.
Yeah, I'll also note that one of the problems for the GOP here isn't so much that they don't have votes out, but like Joe said, there just maybe aren't quite enough. Like, according to the New York Times, Cherokee's entire remaining votes are going to get wiped out by Athens' remaining votes alone. And then after that, the biggest chunk of votes they think is left for the GOP is Forsyth, which is 40,000 votes, but that can get wiped out. They think that's going to get wiped out by Gwinnett alone, not even getting into DeKalb.
Gwinnett's 81% in now, and Warnock is at 63% of the vote. So that is very impressive. And also at 62. That's already exceeding his previous performance and the November performance for Biden. Biden won it by 18 points. This was a Romney County in 2012, just to show you the type of voters that have essentially driven the split. And the diversification has done the trick, too, in a lot of these places. So we're still waiting on Cobb. But with Gwinnett and Fulton pretty much at this point coming in strong for Ossoff and Warnock, it's been enough to put Warnock back in the lead. But when you couple that with the remaining votes in Cobb, with the remaining votes in Clark County, with the remaining votes in DeKalb County especially, and even 20% left in Clayton, it's just hard to overcome. I underestimated the amount of Democratic votes that were left over and focused too much on the Republican counties, where Republicans ended up underperforming their margins, even in the case of Purdue, just back in November 2 months ago. So I concede I was incorrect. I completely underestimated the total number of Democratic votes that would be yielded from the metro area. And I did not expect counties like Rockdale to see a Dem trend. I did not expect even counties up north necessarily, like Cherokee County, Bartow County, and Forsyth see it trend further towards the Democrats. I really thought Perdue would genuinely meet his margins from November.
And you know what? These were the exact numbers where in that article that Kraz and Eric wrote that these are the numbers that said, if they're like this, we will be wrong. And, they've come out like that, and pretty clearly, we're wrong here. We were wrong in our call. We were wrong in our projections. It's looking increasingly more likely that I think within the next 30 minutes here, I think I would feel confident in making a call. I don't know if we're going to see it, but
I think 30 is a bit too soon. I think we got to wait a little bit longer. Again, we've got a lot of stuff out right now. If we're going to do anything, it would be for the Warnock race.
Mm-hmm.
The path to Republican control of either of these seats is increasingly slimming and slimming.
There's nothing left for Loeffler, and arguably not for Perdue either. Nothing.
Well, I do think one thing that we should discuss, and maybe this will be a subject of an article at some point, is I think maybe if Dems do pull out this race, that this changes a lot of the conventional wisdom around the suburban shift. I'm not going to say it was an article of faith, but one of the repeated points, especially in conservative media, is, the suburbs are rented for Dems. Biden and Trump make them look bluer than they actually are. The second Trump is gone, which he's doing his best to not leave. So maybe that has something to do with it. But the second Trump's gone, these places are going to come running back. And I think maybe this shifts a little bit of the conventional wisdom to hey, maybe they're here to stay. And if that's the case, maybe we have to recalculate what we think a post-Trump, a post-Trump political alignment looks like. And someone in the comments said that they think most of Forsyth came in. According to Decision Desk, it looks like it's 87% in, so margin may change. Forsyth is not in according to Decision Desk.
It's not in according to New York Times either. New York Times says
that's
27%.
No, New York Times has Forsyth in at 68-32. That's what I'm seeing. Times has it in.
Oh, mine's not updated. I
see
bad
21% of votes in.
Yeah, that's what I see too. I'm with Eric here.
I'm seeing it on New York Times right now in the Ossoff race. It says Forsyth County, David Perdue leads 68-32. And
how many votes are in, Joe?
Let me do some mental math here. It's about 92,000.
Okay, so that would still leave a significant chunk of votes. And you said it's 68-32.
Yes.
So that'd be the same margin as November, but there is a significant chunk of votes, and I don't know what is out. Although I assume it's election day, but I don't know. Did it shift the needle at all?
If anything, it shifted it left. Also set 1 point victory. Warnock's at a 1.7 point victory according to the needle.
Okay. Yeah, so there was a Forsyth County dub. It looks like it's probably about 90% of expected votes.
Yeah, that's game over. It's not enough to stop DeKalb County and Cobb County.
So what would their vote lead? My side wasn't updated yet, so what would their overall vote lead be?
I still haven't gotten
They're both up by about 1%. Loeffler's up by 0.4%. Purdue's up by about 1%. But honestly, that Forsyth drop just doesn't look like enough, to put it bluntly.
Yeah, I was going to say it's about 40,000 and 7,000 votes respectively for the GOPers, for the two Republican candidates. And if the New York Times is even close to right on how many votes are left in DeKalb, that's going to get completely erased many, many, many times over. So I'm not sure there's enough for the GOP right now.
Yeah, I've said for the past hour, I feel like now there's just nothing there.
I'm still not seeing Forsyth anywhere on that Forsyth update on my side.
It's definitely in there.
Oh, 78%. 78% of the vote is in right now.
Mhm.
Yep, now it's 87%, 67.9 to 32.1. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing on my side. And we're at 78% of the vote in right now.
I do wonder also if there is any backlash whatsoever to Trump if these runoffs go like we think they're about to go. No, he campaigned here. He made Georgia the key issue of the last 2 months. It was, Georgia fraudulent, rigged. And I wonder if there's any kind of backlash. I mean, this is the first time where he really did put his all into a race, and Republicans, they threw everything. They threw the kitchen sink at this one, right? Like, they thought the suburbs would shift back. They thought, Dem turnout would drop like a rock after Biden won. They thought, a variety of things. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be an interesting to see what narratives arise from this. But I definitely think we should reassess the suburban shift, given these numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I feel it's just in the end here. I think it is truly done. I think there's just nowhere enough left, and the banking just did not happen in time.
I think it's interesting because Republicans got big election day turnout. They got let's not understate it. They got 1.2 million people to vote on election day. That's a 1.3 X increase from November's election day. That's an accomplishment, but it's hard when you have to have. I mean, we don't know what the final margins will be, but it's likely they might have needed 1.3 or even 1.4 million voters to show up on election day, and that's a really, really tough ask. I said this to someone earlier, but I think one of the fallacies that I hope that this election probably kills is that X group always ends up voting on X day or at X time, or so-and-so party always gets the votes they need from X group. Like, just because Republicans got, 900,000 voters to show up on election day in November, and that was basically what they needed, that doesn't mean that they can just get 900,000 plus X number in perpetuity. And I hope that maybe this election puts that fallacy to bed, because that was one that always irked me.
Yeah, I mean, it's true in my opinion. The United States Senate is going to flip very incredibly narrowly to the Democrats. I mean, it's incredibly narrow, quite clearly. That's no doubt about that. But it's truly, well and truly, I think we're getting to the point where there is nowhere back for Republicans, for either David Perdue or clearly Kelly Loeffler. I think is even clearer in my opinion. So, yep, here we go, I guess.
Yeah, so now
and we can project right now that Raphael Warnock will defeat Kelly Loeffler. It says Class 2. That is a mistake. It is supposed to be the Class 3 race, so please ignore that. But Raphael Warnock, we can project, will defeat Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler to flip the former seat of Johnny Isaacson. The remaining Republican county dumps have simply just not been enough in our mind to overcome the remaining votes left in DeKalb, in Cobb County, and Clark County, even in Fulton and Clayton County, where you still have 20% of the votes out. So Warnock will win. He will be up again in 2022 in the midterms, which arguably could be the last time that Republicans can honestly contest a statewide race in Georgia with true chances of winning. So Warnock has won.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's almost there. I think Warnock, in the end, I think it's pretty clear to me that Kelly Loeffler was, in the end, a bad candidate, someone who did not appeal to really either sect of Georgians that she needed to. She went through a bloody runoff, basically in her own way, a Republican primary against Doug Collins that clearly, I think, left her damaged in Collins' district. And she just never seemed to match the charisma that Raphael Warnock saw. I think personally, that this is a tough night. This is a tough night for Republicans. There are going to be many upset Republicans in the end. I know I'm not seeing it. I know I'm not necessarily showing it right now, but I am certainly personally not pleased. I know Eric himself is not certainly pleased. I know other Republicans are certainly not pleased tonight. I know Kraz, while he's not showing it either, is probably doing cartwheels in his brain on the results tonight. But I think, honestly, I don't know what we're going to wait on the Ossoff-Purdue race. Maybe some amazing shift could come in there. But truly, I do think that by 10:15 tonight, I truly do think that I think at least we will have made the call that the Democrats have taken the United States Senate, albeit again incredibly slimly and in an incredibly marginal way. But I truly do think that Democrats have pulled off something that without Maine people thought was impossible, but they have pulled it off without Maine. Democrats with 2 Senate seats in Georgia have taken the United States Senate.
And if they win the second Senate seat right here, the Ossoff Purdue seat, then we'll be off of the 2020 elections entirely, with the exception of whatever the heck is going on in New York 22. Well, I ultimately think it's going to go to another special election, and that's going to be a complete disaster of whatever it is. But that would be the end of 2022, the mixed result of both parties, which would be Republicans making gains in the House, losing in the Senate, and losing the White House. Losing the Senate by the narrowest of margins, of course, with the help of voters in North Carolina, Maine, in particular, who voted for the Republican candidates in very contentious races. I think this ultimately is also an indictment of the Republican strategy to rely exclusively on these low turnout, low propensity rural white voters who are, and usually have been, less likely to turn out than usual. I think simply it's trading those voters, trading your suburban and exurban white college-educated voters there for, in this case, for rural voters who clearly have not shown a willingness to turn out, even when your entire platform is catered to them, even when your senator votes with you 100% of the time, either when they're endorsing Trump's rigged election claims. Clearly was not enough to get these people to turn out. 1.1 million, it's a good turnout. But it also wasn't enough to win. If it's 1.2, they probably win. If it's 1.5, they certainly win. But those simply did not materialize.
Eric, I think I just saw someone in my own personal messages say something that I think makes sense. Democrats had to look beyond the Obama coalition to win a presidential race again. And I think in the wake of this, it is time for Republicans to look past the Trump coalition, which is filled with people and ideologues who, in my opinion, request things that are not possible, in my opinion, for a major party to win in the United States of America. there is a branch of people here that I think we should keep in. There are good working class white Americans that I think the Republican Party should continue to court. But obviously, in my opinion, it is time to at least for people to take a step and throw a punch towards the people like Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, and those type of people that have tried to infiltrate the party. And I don't know if it's worked, but clearly it's hurt at least the brand of the party. And it's pretty clear to me that some people need to take a step and, punch someone in the face.
This is why, there's a lot of reasons. The Obama coalition did prove to be useful. The Obama coalition did win 2 presidential elections. It won House majority, the majority of the House vote at least, in 2 presidential terms, and won the Senate vote in 2 terms. But it was completely invisible in 2010 and 2014. It did not show up in 2016. And whatever remnant showed up in 2020 was really dwarfed by increased performance with Biden among white voters, college-educated and rural. It ultimately proved to be a one-hit pony that showed up when Obama was on the ticket and is now gone. Republicans need to strongly consider the possibility that it's the same thing for Trump. You've had stable gains among Latino voters, yes, under Trump, but also in off years in 2018 in Texas. Look at those voters, maybe consider them. Rural black voters, those are part of them. That's an interesting group to look at that did trend Republican down ballot and did so without Trump. Trump was on the ticket, but he's not the only reason they did that. Whereas right here, right now, Democrats are pulling margins in Cobb and Gwinnett County, and Henry and Rockland and Fayette County and Forsyth County that would not have been imagined 16 years ago, in 2004, when Republicans won over 60% of the vote in most of these counties, won 70% in places like Forsyth, won huge margins in these places. Clearly, the Trump coalition works in some ways, but it's been also extremely and extraordinarily effective at alienating a bunch of voters who vote very often, certainly most of the time. And that's not a political statement. That's not a statement of this is the objective right thing to do. It's a statement of a practical, if you want to win elections, focusing your entire personality of your party on one person and their political platform and their beliefs might get you a cycle when they're on, but Trump isn't on the ballot every 2 years. Obama's not on the ballot anymore, and he can't be on the ballot anymore. He had his 2 terms. He had his 2 elections. He did well in them, and then it disappeared. And the cost of that was losing rural strongholds in the South forever. The cost of the Trump coalition is potentially losing states like Georgia and Arizona and the white suburban college whites who have been with Republicans since the 60s, losing them forever. You got to reconsider and look at that if you're a party.
Yeah,
And Elections Daily can now project that Jon Ossoff will defeat David Perdue to win the other Senate runoff. Even though Perdue currently does have a narrow lead, we expect, for the same reason as we did in the Loeffler race, the remaining ballots to make the difference for Ossoff in the end, making him one of the youngest members, if not the youngest, of the U.S. Senate when he takes office. And that concludes our unprojected coverage of the Georgia runoffs and technically concludes the 2020 election cycle.
Mm-hmm. And this is a pretty mediocre end for Republicans right now, for the Republican Party, for their efforts, where most of the party, with the exception of the Trump wing, clearly seem to be fairly unified behind these 2 candidates. And clearly, the reason that they didn't show up, or the reason that they didn't win these races, is they didn't show up. They showed up in good numbers. They showed up in the 1.1 million. That's a pretty solid number. They just didn't show up enough to make up the difference.
Yeah, I think, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. This really has to, and I have to sign off in a little bit, but this really just has to maybe change the perception that, these suburbs are necessarily rented. I think like the Republican Party should take a really good look and take stock of their losses there and say, okay, if these are permanent losses, or substantially permanent, how do we move forward? And I think there was a big assumption, and we saw it from in Republican media circles, from pundits, that the second Trump lost, the second the news networks declared Biden the winner, all these suburbs would just stop caring about voting for Democrats. They would just they'd be done. They'd be going back to voting like it was 2014 again. And that was a really poor assumption to bake in. And in many ways, it reminds me of how Democrats felt after 2016 when they saw all these massive red shifts in the rural Midwest. And they said, oh, Hillary was just the worst possible candidate. We'll do better next time. She didn't visit Wisconsin. We'll have our convention there. And that was ultimately short-sighted. So, yeah, I think this is, if this holds, this is a massive shift, I think, in perception of both Georgia and a lot of different voting blocks.
Before anyone else says anything, I just want to say, we've got 34 people on the stream. We've had a lot more, but you need to follow Kraz on every take he has on Georgia right now. This is a man who, since June, since the summer, at the very least since the summer, has been warning, looking at this and seeing that, said, hey, this is absolutely a possibility. And he has done it time and time again. You see his Twitter handle is right there. His Twitter handle is right there in his name tag. You need to go follow him now. You should go follow us right now because Kraz writes for us. He's not, I don't know, we might lose him because he's so good. I hope we don't lose him because he's that good. Because you know what? I mean, it is in the end. I'm gonna let load now because there's no point in it. I am furious as a member of the Republican Party right now. What has happened?
Yep, that's the wrap.
And in my opinion, there is no one who was more to blame than the President of the United States and Donald Trump, with his inability to admit that he lost. I know this is a man who has struggled with time and time again throughout his life to admit that he has lost. But in my opinion, it is the end of the time in which Donald Trump should ever be a part of the Republican Party electoral politics again, as much as the Republican Party can. It is absolutely time to throw a punch back. I know that we not Trumpy R's are not, people who normally stand up and throw the punches, but, it's time. It's time to stand up and throw the punches, in my opinion. Fight back against these types of people who are saying the way that we've done things and have won in states like Arizona and Georgia is not enough anymore. Because clearly these people are idiots. They're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. It's time to move on from what that was. And I'm gonna be certainly someone who for these next 2 years is gonna be fighting within that. The fact that I that's what I do. I'm not afraid to throw a punch, and I hope that many of my other fellow Republicans who I think feel like me, and I think there are many other younger Republicans who feel like me, and that it's time to say, let's step up and let's start to fight back a little bit.
And it's pretty, at this point, what we're honestly looking at here is a 50-50 Senate. It's a Senate where Republicans are stuck in a minority. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will have the tie-breaking vote. Democrats won't have full reign over legislative priorities because of the narrow advantages in both houses, but they will have an advantage in getting through much of Joe Biden's legislative priorities, the president-elect. So ultimately, this is going to result in a period of contemplation for the Republican Party. I think it's safe to say that. It's also going to result in contemplation on the Democratic Party, for sure, as to what the future of that looks like and how to hold the Senate in the future. And one thing it certainly sets up is a series of major Senate elections in 2022, where literally one race could flip the entire Senate at this point. One race going differently. All of a sudden, every marginally competitive seat could become a major place to look at. So that's ultimately what we're going to be looking at in the next 2 years. We'll also have the Virginia elections and the New Jersey elections in 2021. Those are really important as well.
Just to interrupt there, we will be, by the end of the week, we will not only will be releasing our full Virginia statewide and House of Delegates ratings for 2021. There will be a write-up done by me as well. So keep following us.
Ethan and I are putting out New Jersey ratings next week for everything down from the governor's office down to the county level office.
Follow Harrison by the way too, because he is someone who is at this point he is going to try taking a stab at rating the New Jersey county races. So watch what he's going to be doing these next couple of months.
And
he's going to be doing a lot of good
follow at Ethan C7 and Ben J. Kest too, because Ben Kestenbaum and Ethan Chen are helping me out with New Jersey. We're doing it as a team effort. So
yes, Dawson Weinhold and Ethan as well. He goes to college in Virginia. Those are the two helping me out on Virginia. We'll be ranking all those. Kraz and Eric and Adam Trencher, who sadly couldn't be on tonight, they will all certainly be helping us in those races as well. But this is a shift, and I mean, who could have believed? If you would have told me a year ago that the Democrats would win the United States Senate with two Senate seats in the state of Georgia, and technically none in the state of Georgia and in the state of Maine, because Angus King, he might caucus with the Democrats, but he is an independent, and Susan Collins surviving. Who would have believed it? Look, I mean, this is the type of stuff that we're going to be talking about here on Elections Daily the next couple of days. And I have something very exciting to announce. Tough Talk will be back on Thursday. It's hosted by me, our show, Tough Talk. We will have Lakshya Jain, who produced a model that showed results very much like this tonight. He will be coming on with me on Tough Talk to describe what went right for Democrats. I plan on having some talk of Republicans to say what they think went wrong. Certainly that's what I'm going to be doing. So be here. We will be live again on Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'll be live here. Lakshya Jain is confirmed. We'll be hopefully having a Republican guest on soon as well as we begin to slowly start to wrap up our coverage here tonight. But keep watching. Follow us on Twitter. Follow all four of us here on Twitter. Joseph Szymanski, H.W. Lavelle Maps, Kraz Greinitz, D.E. Cunningham 2. This is the type of stuff that we will continue to do.
And if you like the stream here, we've got two major projects we're going to be announcing in the coming towards the end of the month. I would hope that you'll be really impressed with. I think we'll be really excited about. We're really excited to go forward with these and to go forward into the next year of Elections Daily after our first full year of being an outlet. We're really excited to move forward with that, and we think you'll really be pleased with what we're going to be doing going forward. But yeah, thank you guys for all showing up and watching. I really appreciate your comments, the positive, supportive remarks on here, and we really appreciate you following us and just liking our content in general. That's really cool. So I guess all I can say before we wrap up is just thanks. Really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks to all our viewers tonight. We had a good turnout. We appreciate all of you, regardless of your stance on what we're covering. And
so please subscribe, everyone. Please make sure to hit that notifications button and subscribe here to our YouTube channel. Like I said, we're going to have a lot more content. We're going to have a lot more content in the coming days. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications button. We're going to have so much more. We've got this. We are going to continue to talk about this. We will have articles. We will have news. Like I said, Tough Talk is going to be on. We're ready to go here. I'm ready to go. Harrison's ready to talk about this. Kraz again. Kraz, I'm ready to say this is why we have Kraz, because seriously, people call Rachel Bitecofer the elections whisperer. It really should be Kraz, at least as the Georgia whisperer. Go follow Kraz, everyone. He really is someone I think that is he is special. He's got a great future. I think everyone here's got a great future. And just be ready, folks, because we're going to have so much more for you over the next coming weeks, months, and years, as not only as we transition out of 2020 and move into 2021. Like I said, end of the week, keep following us on Twitter at Elections Daily. We will have our Virginia 2021 rankings out on Friday. I can promise that, since I'm the one running them. 2021, by Friday, we'll have our rankings. So keep us following for that.
Sounds good.
Yep. And so with that, I think we'll close off for the night. Again, thank you guys for showing up. We really appreciate your support, as I said before.
Yep.
And so with that, a good night, and we'll see you the next election, I guess, whenever the next election would be. we'll be here.
Mhm.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, so
Yep.
thank you again, guys. We appreciate you all coming on. And with that, we'll, I guess, just play the intro again as an outro because I think it's still pretty cool for those who haven't seen it. So thank
Yeah.
you and good night.